The sun broke over the New Mexico horizon at exactly 0537 hours. Same as it had for the past 17 years, James Hawkins had lived on this patch of hardscrabble land 15 miles north of the Mexican border. The light came in gold and unforgiving, the kind that showed every crack in a man's face and every mistake in his past. Hawk stood on the porch of his ranch house, coffee in one hand, watching that light creep across the desert floor like an advancing army. He was 58 years old. His back hurt. His knees complained when the weather changed. But his eyes were still sharp enough to spot a coyote at 800 yards, and his hands steady enough to make that coyote regret its life choices. The coffee was black and strong, the way Marines drank it when there was nothing else to look forward to except the next patrol, and maybe, if God was feeling generous, making it back alive. Hawk finished the cup in 3 long pulls, set it on the railing with the kind of precision that came from a lifetime of doing everything exactly right because doing it wrong meant people died. Then he walked to the rifle range. The range wasn't much to look at. 100 yards of cleared ground stretching east toward a natural berm where the desert started climbing toward the mountains. Targets at 100, 300, 500, and 800 yards. Steel plates that rang like church bells when you hit them center mass. Paper silhouettes that showed you exactly where your rounds went and exactly how much work you still had to do. Hawk had built this range with his own hands the year after his wife died, when the silence in the house got too loud and the only conversation he could stand was the one between a man and his rifle. He knelt beside his shooting mat, old canvas worn smooth from use, and opened the hard case that held his rifle. A Remington 700.308 Winchester, the civilian version of the M24 he'd carried in Iraq. 43 years since he'd first picked up a rifle in Marine boot camp, and he still couldn't sleep without checking his perimeter. Still woke up at 0500 because that's when the sergeants started yelling and the war started happening. Still saw faces sometimes, young faces that stayed young forever, while his got older and more weathered like the desert rock. The rifle came out of the case like a prayer. Hawk's hands moved through the ritual without conscious thought. Check the barrel, check the action, check the scope mounts. Load 5 rounds of match-grade ammunition, 168 grain Sierra Match Kings, the same load he'd worked up 20 years ago and never found reason to change. Settle into position. Breathe. The world got quiet. The past got quiet. Everything got quiet except the tiny universe that existed between the shooter and the target. 800 yards downrange, a steel plate the size of a man's torso waited in the morning light. Hawk's crosshairs found it, steadied, became part of it. His breath came in slow and even, the rhythm his body had learned in the Iraqi desert when silence meant survival. Inhale, exhale, half exhale, hold. The rifle barked once, a sharp crack that rolled across the desert and came back as an echo. 800 yards away, the steel plate sang its song. Dead center. Same as yesterday, same as the day before that. Same as every morning for 17 years, because the day a man stopped being precise was the day he stopped being dangerous. And Hawk had made too many promises to too many dead men to ever stop being dangerous. He was safing the rifle, muscle memory running the show, while his mind drifted to thoughts of breakfast and whether he had enough coffee for the rest of the week when he heard the vehicle. Not the sound of a civilian truck ambling down a dirt road. The sound of a law enforcement vehicle driven by someone who knew exactly where he was going and didn't particularly care about his suspension. Hawk's hands paused. His awareness shifted from the rifle to the wider world, cataloging threats the way a wolf catalogs the wind. The Crown Victoria came into view 60 seconds later, throwing up a plume of dust that hung in the still morning air like a question mark. Sheriff's Department markings. Hawk recognized the vehicle before he recognized the driver, which told him everything he needed to know. Ray Bolton had been driving that same Crown Vic for 8 years, ever since budget cuts meant the department couldn't afford new vehicles and had to make do with the old ones. Bolton was a good man, Army Ranger, 2 tours in Iraq, the kind of cop who understood that sometimes the law was a starting point for a conversation rather than the final word. He also didn't make social calls at 0600 hours. Hawk stood, left the rifle on the mat, and walked toward the house. By the time Bolton's Crown Vic stopped in front of the porch, Hawk had already spotted the second passenger in the back seat. Young, male, handcuffed. The boy's head was down, but Hawk could see the tension in his shoulders, the particular kind of rigid anger that came from someone who thought the world had done him wrong and couldn't see his own hand in the doing. Bolton climbed out of the vehicle, 52 years old and carrying it well, lean and weathered with the kind of face that had seen enough trouble to recognize it before it arrived. He nodded to Hawk, no handshake, no pleasantries. The kind of acknowledgement men gave each other when words were just decoration on the real conversation. James, Bolton said. Ray, Hawk replied. Bolton glanced back at the kid in the Crown Vic, then back to Hawk. The morning light caught the lines around his eyes, deep grooves from squinting at too many crime scenes and too many bad decisions. Got a situation, he said. Need your help. Hawk waited. In the back seat, the kid raised his head enough for Hawk to get a look at his face. 19, maybe 20. Dark hair that needed cutting. Eyes that held the particular kind of fury that came from losing something important and not knowing how to get it back. There was something familiar in the set of his jaw, the angle of his cheekbones, something that made Hawk's chest tighten in a way that had nothing to do with age and everything to do with memory. Tyler Rivera, Bolton said, and the name hit Hawk like incoming mortar fire. Marcus's boy. The world did something strange then. It kept moving, kept existing, but Hawk wasn't quite in it anymore. He was standing in the courtyard of a fire base in Helmand Province, Afghanistan, in 2011, watching a medic work on a man who was already gone, whose blood was too red against the tan desert dirt. Marcus Rivera, Staff Sergeant, United States Marine Corps, Scout Sniper. Hawk's spotter in Iraq, his friend for 20 years. The best man Hawk had ever known. Promise me, Marcus had said, words coming wet and wrong from lungs that were failing. If anything happens, watch over my boy, Tyler, watch over him. Hawk had promised. Had held Marcus's hand while he died, had flown home with his body, had stood at the funeral and looked at a 7-year-old boy who didn't understand why his father wasn't coming home. Had sent money every year on Tyler's birthday, anonymous checks that the boy's grandmother cashed without knowing where they came from. Had kept his distance because what did an old killer have to offer a child except nightmares and the smell of gun oil? 13 years. 13 years since Marcus had died saving Hawk's life, pushing him out of the way of an IED that would have turned them both into pink mist. 13 years of survivor's guilt that sat in Hawk's stomach like a stone. 13 years of wondering if he'd kept his promise or just paid money to make his conscience quiet. He's had some trouble, Bolton was saying. Bar fight, third one this month. Grandmother's done bailing him out. Kid's headed for county lockup, or worse if someone doesn't get through to him. Hawk looked at Tyler. The boy was staring back now, and there it was. Marcus's eyes, the same dark brown, the same intensity. But where Marcus had used that intensity to focus, to accomplish the mission, to protect his Marines, Tyler was using it to burn, to rage against something he couldn't name and couldn't fight. Why bring him to me? Hawk asked, though he already knew the answer. Bolton's expression shifted, something like sympathy crossing his face. Because you're the only one left who knew his father, the only one who might get through to him before he throws his life away. He paused. Marcus left letters for the boy. I found them when I was going through some of his effects last month. One of them had your name in it. Said if anything happened, you'd know what to do. The morning air felt too thin. Hawk's hands wanted to shake, wanted to reach for something to steady themselves against. He kept them still through sheer force of will, the same way he kept them still through 2 tours in Iraq and 1 more in Afghanistan, through firefights and ambushes and moments when everything depended on not moving, not breathing, just being absolutely still. I'm not a babysitter, Hawk said. No, Bolton agreed. You're a Marine, and that boy is the son of a Marine who died saving your life. So I'm not asking you to babysit. I'm asking you to honor a promise. The words hung in the desert air like smoke. Tyler was watching through the car window now, and Hawk could see the intelligence behind the anger, the awareness that this conversation was about him and about futures that hadn't been decided yet. The kid was smart. Marcus had been smart too. The kind of tactical mind that could read a battlefield in seconds and find the solution everyone else missed. Tyler had inherited that mind. He just never learned how to use it for anything except finding new ways to be angry. Hawk walked to the Crown Vic, opened the back door, and looked Tyler in the eyes. The kid didn't look away, didn't flinch. Good. Fear was useful, but only if you didn't let it control you. The ones who looked away were the ones who broke when things got hard. Tyler wasn't going to break. He was going to explode, eventually, and take chunks of his life with him when he did. Your father was the best man I ever knew, Hawk said. No preamble, no softening, just the truth. He died pushing me out of the way of a bomb. I've spent 13 years trying to figure out how to live with that. You want to throw your life away on bar fights and stupidity? That's your choice. But you do it on my property. You do it my way. Marine discipline. No questions, no arguments. You follow orders or you go to lockup. Those are your options. Tyler's jaw worked. The muscles in his face tightened, released, tightened again. When he spoke, his voice was rough, like he'd spent the night yelling or crying or both. My father died for nothing in a war that didn't matter. You old men ruined the world, and now you want to lecture me about discipline? I don't need your charity. Good, Hawk said, because I'm not offering charity. I'm offering a choice. You can rot in a cell because you're too angry to see past your own nose. Or you can spend the next month learning why your father became the man he was. After that, you walk away if you want, but you give me 30 days. That's the price. Bolton was watching this exchange with the careful neutrality of a man who knew when to let other people fight their battles. Tyler looked from Hawk to the sheriff and back again, calculating odds, weighing options. Finally, he nodded once, sharp and bitter. 30 days, he said, then I'm gone. Fair enough, Hawk replied, and stepped back so Bolton could unlock the cuffs. Bolton handed Hawk a manila envelope as Tyler climbed out of the Crown Vic, rubbing his wrists. Marcus's letters, the sheriff said quietly. Thought the boy should have them. When he's ready. He paused. Good luck, James. That kid's carrying a lot of anger. So was his father, Hawk said, before the Corps taught him what to do with it. Bolton nodded, climbed back into his vehicle, and drove away in another plume of dust. Hawk and Tyler stood in the morning light, two strangers connected by a dead man's promise and nothing else. The silence stretched out like the desert itself, empty and waiting to be filled. You got a bag? Hawk asked finally. Tyler jerked his head toward a backpack in the dirt where Bolton must have tossed it. Hawk picked it up, felt the weight. Not much, some clothes, maybe a toothbrush. The possessions of someone who'd been moving through life without putting down roots, without building anything that mattered. Bunkhouse is behind the main house, Hawk said. You get the room on the right. Clean sheets in the closet. Bathroom's shared, but I'm the only other one using it, so keep it clean. Breakfast is at 6:30. You're late, you don't eat. Lunch is at 1200. Dinner at 1800. Miss a meal, that's on you. Wake up is 500. You're not on the porch ready to work by 5:15. I drag you out of bed myself. Questions? Tyler's expression was somewhere between disbelief and fury. You're kidding. Do I look like I'm kidding? The kid studied Hawk's face, looking for the crack, the weakness, the point where he could push and make this old man back down. Hawk had seen that look before, on enemy soldiers, on prisoners, on young Marines who thought they were tougher than they were. He'd learned a long time ago that the best response was no response at all. Just stand there and let them figure out that some walls didn't have cracks. Tyler looked away first. No, sir, he muttered, and Hawk caught the reflex, the automatic response that someone had drilled into this kid when he was young. Marcus had to be. Marcus would have taught his son the basics even if Tyler had forgotten them or buried them under layers of anger. Good, Hawk said. Get yourself settled. 0630 is 40 minutes from now. Don't be late. He walked back to the house, leaving Tyler standing in the dirt with his backpack and his anger and his dead father's letters that he didn't know existed yet. Inside, Hawk put the manila envelope on the kitchen table and stared at it for a long moment. Marcus's handwriting on the outside, neat and precise, the way everything about Marcus had been neat and precise. A man who measured twice and cut once. A man who'd seen Hawk's potential when Hawk was a burned-out Iraq vet who couldn't hold down a job and taught him that discipline was the answer to chaos. Now Hawk was supposed to do the same for Marcus's son. Teach a kid who thought the world owed him something that the world didn't owe anybody anything, but you could still make something of yourself if you were willing to do the work. Teach him that anger was a tool, not a master. Teach him that his father's death meant something, even if that something was just the lesson that some men died so others could live, and the living had a responsibility to make that sacrifice mean something. Hawk's hands were shaking. He looked down at them, at the age spots and the scars and the steadiness that was mostly gone now except when it mattered, except when he had a rifle in his hands and a target downrange. He made them still through an act of will, curled them into fists until the shaking stopped, then opened them again and reached for the coffee pot. At 6:28, Tyler appeared on the porch. Hawk was already sitting at the kitchen table. 2 plates of scrambled eggs and toast laid out, 2 cups of coffee steaming in the morning air that came through the screen door. The kid looked like he'd washed his face at least, run wet hands through his hair. His eyes were red. From anger or tears or lack of sleep, Hawk couldn't tell and didn't ask. "Sit," Hawk said. Tyler sat, picked up his fork, put it down. "I'm not hungry." "Eat anyway, you're going to need it." "Why would it be in? What are we doing?" Hawk bit into his toast, chewed, swallowed. "Teaching you what your father knew, starting with the basics, how to be still." Tyler's expression was pure skepticism. "Being still? That's your big lesson? I can be still?" "No," Hawk said. "You can be quiet, that's different. Being still means your mind is still, your breathing is still, everything about you is in control. When's the last time you felt in control?" The question landed. Hawk saw it in the way Tyler's face changed, the way his shoulders tensed. A direct hit. The kid looked down at his eggs, picked up his fork again, and started eating without another word. They finished breakfast in silence, the kind that was heavy with things unsaid but not hostile. Just 2 men eating food and thinking their own thoughts. After breakfast, Hawk led Tyler to the rifle range. The sun was higher now, the heat starting to build the way it did in New Mexico summers, dry and relentless. Hawk's Remington 700 was still on the shooting mat where he'd left it. He picked it up, cradled it like a child, and held it out to Tyler. "You ever shoot?" Hawk asked. Tyler took the rifle, awkwardly, hands uncertain where to grip. "Video games," he said. "Call of Duty. I'm pretty good." Hawk nodded slowly. "Video games," he repeated. "All right, show me." He pointed to the 100-yard target, a paper silhouette of a man's torso. Tyler looked at it, looked at the rifle, tried to figure out how to hold it. Hawk watched without helping, cataloging the mistakes. Wrong grip, wrong stance, wrong everything. The kid had no idea what he was doing, and he was about to find out. "Safety's here," Hawk said, pointing. "Push it forward, aim at the target, pull the trigger." Tyler did as instructed. The weapon kicked and barked, and Tyler's shot went so wide it didn't even hit the paper. He stared downrange, confusion and embarrassment warring on his face. "In Call of Duty," Hawk said mildly, "does the rifle kick like that?" "No," Tyler admitted. "Does your breathing matter?" "No." "Does the wind affect your shot?" "No." "Then you don't know how to shoot. You know how to press buttons. Now put the rifle down and I'll show you what your father learned." For the next 3 hours, Hawk taught Tyler the fundamentals. How to breathe. How to find a natural point of aim. How to squeeze the trigger without jerking. How to call your shot, to know where the bullet went before you looked through the scope. How to be patient. Tyler's group started terrible. 5 rounds spread across a foot at 100 yards. By lunch, he'd tightened them to 6 inches. Not good, but better. Progress. The kind you could measure. They ate sandwiches in silence on the porch, and Hawk saw Tyler looking at the envelope on the kitchen table. "Those are from your father," Hawk said. "Letters he wrote, for you. When you're ready to read them, they're there. I'm not going to tell you when that should be." Tyler's jaw worked again. That tell that said emotions were close to the surface. Why didn't he give them to me himself? Because he was deployed. Because the war didn't stop for letter writing. Because he died before he got the chance. Hawk paused. Or maybe because he knew reading them would hurt, and he didn't want to hurt you until you were strong enough to handle it. I don't know, but they're here now. That afternoon, they worked on the range again. Hawk teaching, Tyler learning, the process grinding forward like a tank through mud. Slow, painful, necessary. By evening, Tyler could put all 5 rounds into a 4-inch circle at 100 yards. Hawk told him it was acceptable for a first day. Tyler almost smiled. At dinner, Tyler spoke up during the silence. "Why did my father become a sniper?" Hawk set down his fork, considered the question. Considered how much truth the kid could handle. Because he was good at protecting people from far away. In war, the people who get killed first are usually the ones charging forward. Brave, stupid, Dead. Your father figured out that you could protect the brave and stupid ones from 1,000 yards away if you were patient enough, so he learned patience. He learned to wait 3 days for 10 seconds of action, and he saved a lot of lives doing it. Did he kill a people? Yes. A lot? Enough, Hawk said. War isn't about body counts. It's about completing the mission and bringing your people home. Your father did both. Tyler absorbed this, staring at his plate. Did you kill people? Hawk met the kid's eyes. Yes, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, men who would have killed my Marines if I hadn't stopped them first. I don't lose sleep over pulling the trigger. I lose sleep over the ones I missed, the ones who got away and killed someone else's son because I wasn't fast enough or precise enough or good enough. He paused. That's what your father taught me. The weight isn't in the taking of life. It's in the failing to protect it. Silence. Then Tyler asked quietly, do you think he'd be proud of me, the way I am now? No, Hawk said, and the honesty landed like a slap. But I think he'd understand why you're angry. And I think he'd tell you the same thing he told me when I came back from Iraq all screwed up and angry at the world. That anger is a tool. Use it. Don't let it use it you. Tyler nodded slowly, pushed his food around his plate. I'll try, he said. Trying is a start, Hawk replied. Doing is what matters. That night, Hawk sat on his porch in the darkness, listening to the desert. Somewhere in the bunkhouse, Tyler was maybe sleeping, maybe reading his father's letters, maybe staring at the ceiling and thinking about everything that had changed in one day. Hawk didn't know and didn't intrude. The kid would process in his own time. What Hawk did know was that he'd made a promise 13 years ago, and today was the first day he'd actually kept it. Not with money, not with distance, but with presence, with teaching, with passing on what Marcus had passed to him. The thought should have brought peace, but all it brought was the memory of Marcus bleeding out in the dirt, asking Hawk to watch over his boy. I'm trying, brother, Hawk whispered to the darkness. God help me, I'm trying. Inside the house, his phone rang. Hawk almost didn't answer it, almost let it go to voicemail because whatever it was could wait until morning. But old habits died hard, and Marines answered the phone because sometimes the call was important. He walked inside, picked up the receiver. Hawkins, he said. James, the voice was Father Miguel Santos, the priest who ran the mission church 15 miles south near the border. A good man, a man who helped people cross into safety when the law said they should stay in danger. A man whose calls usually meant trouble. I apologize for the late hour, but we have a situation. A young woman crossed the border 3 days ago. She's being hunted by the cartel. Her sister was taken for trafficking, and this woman witnessed a murder while trying to find her. Hawk closed his eyes. Miguel, I don't do that anymore. I know, but James, she's 19 years old. They will kill her if we don't help, and I think you're the only one who can. The silence stretched out. Hawk thought about Tyler in the bunkhouse, about the promise he'd made, about teaching the kid discipline and honor, and all the things that made a man a Marine. Thought about what kind of lesson it would be to turn away from someone who needed help just because it was inconvenient or dangerous. What's her name? Hawk asked. Maria Flores. She's terrified, James. She has no one else. Hawk looked through his kitchen window toward the bunkhouse, where a kid slept who needed a father figure and a purpose and a reason to believe the world wasn't entirely terrible. Looked at Marcus's letters on the table. Looked at his own reflection in the dark glass. A man in his late 50s who'd made too many promises and broken too many of them. Bring her to the ranch, Hawk said. After dark tomorrow, I'll figure something out. Bless you, my friend. Hawk hung up the phone and stood in his kitchen, feeling the weight of promises and the weight of years and the weight of choosing to do the right thing when the right thing was usually the hard thing. Somewhere in his memory, Marcus was laughing, the way he used to laugh when Hawk complained about a mission being too difficult or too dangerous. That's why they pay us the big bucks, Hawk, Marcus would say, because we do the impossible before breakfast and the merely difficult by lunch. Except they didn't pay anything anymore. Just asked. And Hawk kept saying yes because that's what Marines did. They kept their promises. They protected people who couldn't protect themselves. They stood on walls in the darkness so others could sleep safely in their beds. Even if those walls were in the middle of the New Mexico desert, and even if the people sleeping safely were a 19-year-old kid with his father's eyes and a young woman running from cartel killers and an old priest who believed in redemption. Hawk turned off the lights, checked the locks, and walked to his bedroom. Tomorrow would come at 0500 whether he was ready or not. Tomorrow would bring new problems, new challenges, new chances to keep promises or break them. But tonight, for the first time in 13 years, Hawk felt like maybe, just maybe, he was actually keeping the promise that mattered most. He fell asleep thinking about Marcus, about Tyler, about the long road ahead. And if he dreamed of Iraq, of blood on sand and screaming that never stopped, well, that was the price he paid for being alive when better men were dead. The price he'd keep paying until the day they put him in the ground next to his wife, and maybe, if God was feeling generous, next to the brothers who'd gone before. The desert wind blew through the screens, carrying the smell of dust and sage, and somewhere far away, the faint sound of vehicles crossing the border in the darkness. Hawk's eyes opened. His hand reached automatically for the pistol on his nightstand. Old habits, old wars, old promises that never stopped asking to be kept. He lay awake until dawn, watching the shadows, waiting for 0500, waiting for Tyler to wake up and the next day of teaching to begin, waiting for Maria Flores to arrive with her terror and her need and her sister who was lost in the machinery of evil that ground people up and spit them out broken, waiting for the moment when he'd have to decide how much of the old warrior he could still be and whether Tyler was ready to learn that lesson too. The sun came up at 5:37, same as always. Hawk rose with it, made his coffee, and walked to the porch. Tyler was already there, waiting. The kid's eyes were red again, but this time Hawk knew why. On the table between them was an open letter, Marcus's handwriting visible in the morning light. Tyler looked up at Hawk, and something had changed in his face. The anger was still there, but it was different now. Focused, directed, a tool instead of a master. My father wrote that I should trust you, Tyler said quietly, that you're the best man he knew, that if I'm reading this, it means he's gone and I should listen to everything you teach me. Hawk nodded, said nothing. He also wrote that he adopted me when I was 7, that my real father beat my mother to death and was in prison, that Marcus saved me from foster care and raised me as his own. Tyler's voice cracked. Why didn't anyone tell me? Because you were a child, Hawk said, and children don't need to carry the weight of every truth at once. Marcus told me once that he'd tell you when you were ready. He must have thought 18 was ready. Tyler folded the letter carefully, placed it back in the envelope. There's more. 9 more letters. I read them all. He talked about you and everyone, about what you taught him, about how you saved his life in Iraq, about how, if he died, I should find you because you'd teach me to be a man. The morning air was cool. Hawk sipped his coffee, let the silence settle. I'm ready to learn, Tyler said. Whatever you want to teach me, I'm ready. Hawk looked at the kid, at Marcus's eyes staring back at him from a younger face, and made his decision. Good, he said, because tonight we have work to do. A young woman is coming here. She's running from people who want to kill her. Her sister's been taken by cartel traffickers, and we're going to help her. Tyler's eyes widened. We are? Your father spent his whole life protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. That's what Marines do. That's what good men do. You want to honor his memory? This is how. Hawk paused. It's going to be dangerous. It's going to require discipline and training and maybe doing things that scare you. But if we do it right, we save a life, maybe 2. That's the work. That's the mission. You in? Tyler stood up straight, and for just a second, Hawk saw Marcus standing there. Same determination, same fire, same willingness to run toward danger instead of away from it. I'm in, Tyler said. And somewhere in the morning light, in the space between the living and the dead, Hawk could have sworn he heard Marcus laughing again. Proud, satisfied, at peace. The teaching was about to begin. The week began before sunrise. The way all important things began in James Hawkins's world. Tyler Rivera stood on the porch at 0500 sharp, no longer needing to be dragged from bed, no longer fighting the routine. Something had shifted in the kid after reading his father's letters. The anger was still there, burning behind his eyes like coals, but now it had direction. Purpose. Marcus had written about discipline being the difference between a warrior and a thug, and Tyler was starting to understand what that meant. Hawk handed him a cup of coffee without speaking. The ritual was becoming familiar. Stand in the pre-dawn darkness, drink the bitter fuel that Marines ran on, Watch the eastern horizon for the first hint of light. Think about the day ahead and the work that needed doing. Tyler's hands were steadier now around the cup. 5 days of waking at 0500 had taught his body new rhythms, pushed out the late nights, in the bar fights, in the aimless fury that had defined him before. They walked to the range in silence, boots crunching on gravel, the desert air cool and thin. Hawk carried his Remington 700 like it was part of his body, an extension of will and purpose. Tyler carried the Savage 110 that Hawk had pulled from the gun safe 2 days ago, a beginner's rifle in .308 Winchester that was accurate enough to teach the fundamentals and forgiving enough not to punish mistakes too harshly. Learning to shoot was like learning anything else. Start with tools that helped instead of hurt. The first shots of the day went downrange at 0530, the sharp crack of the rifles breaking the desert silence and sending it scattering across the scrubland like startled birds. Hawk fired first, the 800-yard steel plate singing its response 3 seconds later. Center mass, always center mass. Tyler watched, calculated, tried to absorb the stillness in Hawk's body, the complete absence of wasted motion. Then it was his turn. 300 yards this morning. Tyler had graduated from 102 days ago, his groups tight enough that Hawk deemed him ready for distance. The target was a steel silhouette, man-sized, painted white so it stood out against the brown desert berm. Tyler settled into position on the shooting mat, muscle memory taking over the way Hawk had drilled into him. Check the rifle, check the scope, check the wind. The morning air was still, no flags moving, no mirage dancing off the desert floor. Good conditions, the kind that let you focus on fundamentals instead of fighting the environment. Breathe in, breathe out, find the natural point of aim. Let the crosshairs settle on the target's center mass. Don't force it, don't muscle it. Just let the rifle point where your body wants it to point. Squeeze. The rifle barked, and Tyler's shoulder absorbed the recoil, his eyes staying on the scope to watch the bullet's impact. 300 yards away, the steel plate rang. Not center, high and right, maybe 4 inches from perfect, but a hit. Progress. Hawk's voice came quiet and without judgment. Wind. None visible, Tyler replied. But you pulled right. Why? Tyler thought about it, replaying the shot in his mind the way Hawk had taught him. Every shot was a lesson if you paid attention. Breathing, I held too long before the trigger break. Good, again. The morning passed in a rhythm of fire and analysis. Tyler shot. Hawk observed. They discussed what worked and what didn't, breaking down each trigger pull into its component parts until shooting stopped being something you did and started being something you understood. By 0800, Tyler had put 20 rounds downrange, and his groups had tightened from 6 inches to 3. Not perfect, but better. That was the only measurement that mattered. Not perfect, just better than yesterday. They walked back to the house for breakfast, eggs and toast again. The same meal they'd eaten for 5 straight days because Hawk believed in routine and Tyler was learning not to question it. The simplicity was freeing in a way he hadn't expected. No decisions about what to eat or when to wake or how to structure the day. Just the routine, unchanging and solid. A framework to build on instead of another thing to fight against. Maria Flores sat at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee untouched in front of her. Her dark eyes watching the desert through the window like she expected it to birth monsters at any moment. She'd arrived 2 nights ago in Father Santos's truck, 19 years old and terrified, carrying nothing but the clothes on her back and the memory of her sister being dragged into a van by men with cartel tattoos and dead eyes. Tyler had opened the door to find her collapsed on the porch, crying, saying his name over and over because she recognized him from campus, from the life they'd both had before the world turned violent and complicated. Hawk had brought her inside without hesitation, set her up in the spare bedroom, and told her she was safe now. Then he'd looked at Tyler with an expression that said this was the work, this was what Marines did, and if Tyler wanted to honor his father's memory, he'd better be ready to help. The first night, Maria had told them everything. Her sister Isabella, 21 years old and beautiful, had crossed the border a month ago looking for work. The coyotes who'd promised safe passage had instead sold her to the cartel's trafficking operation. Maria had followed, trying to find Isabella, trying to bring her home. Instead, she'd witnessed an execution, a coyote shot in the head for skimming money, and now the cartel was hunting her to tie up loose ends. Tyler looked at Maria now, at the exhaustion carved into her young face, and felt something shift in his chest. This was real. Not Call of Duty, not abstract concepts about protecting people. A real woman, a real threat, a real chance to do something that mattered. "We're going to find your sister," Tyler said. Maria's eyes found his, desperate for hope, but too scared to believe it. "How? They have men everywhere, guns. They kill anyone who interferes." Hawk set his coffee cup down with precision. "They have numbers. We have training, and we have something they don't." "What?" Maria asked. "Patience," Hawk replied, "and the willingness to take our time and do it right." That afternoon, the real training began. Hawk spread topographical maps across the kitchen table, satellite imagery provided by Sheriff Bolton through channels that were probably not entirely legal, but were definitely necessary. The maps showed the border region in detail, every road and arroyo and abandoned building marked with the kind of precision that came from military intelligence gathering. "This is where your sister was last seen," Hawk said, pointing to a compound 30 miles south of the border. "Cartel safe house. They move girls through there before sending them to Juarez for auction. If Isabella is still in the pipeline, she'll pass through here." Tyler studied the map, his mind working through the tactical problem the way he'd learned to work through shooting problems. Break it down, identify the variables, find the solution. How do we get close enough to confirm she's there? "Reconnaissance," Hawk said. "We observe from distance, we document patterns, we find the weakness in their security, then we exploit it." "That could take weeks," Tyler protested. "It could," Hawk agreed. "Or it could take days. Depends on how good we are and how sloppy they are. But rushing gets people killed. Your father taught me that in Iraq. The sniper who moves first usually dies first." Maria leaned forward, her finger tracing the roads on the map. "There is a church here, 5 miles from the compound. Father Santos knows the priest there. He helps people sometimes." Hawk nodded slowly. "Good. That's our forward operating base. We stage from the church, we use local knowledge, we minimize our footprint." He looked at Tyler. "This is different from shooting targets on a range. This is fieldcraft, surveillance, operating in hostile territory without being detected. You ready to learn?" Tyler felt his pulse quicken. This was it. The transition from student to operator, from training to mission. "Yes, sir." "Then we start with the fundamentals. How to move without being seen, how to observe without being observed, how to think like the enemy so we can predict what they'll do before they do it." The next 3 days were an education in patience that made shooting practice look like instant gratification. Hawk taught Tyler to low crawl through the brush on Hawk's property, moving so slowly it took an hour to cover 100 yards, every motion deliberate and calculated to avoid creating patterns that human eyes would catch. He taught him to use binoculars and spotting scopes, not just to look, but to really see, to catalog details and build a picture of the enemy's routine from 1,000 tiny observations. They practiced in the desert behind the ranch, Hawk setting up scenarios where Tyler had to approach a position without being spotted. More often than not, Hawk caught him. A flash of sun off the binoculars, the sound of a boot on gravel, the movement of brush that was too regular to be wind. Each failure was a lesson, and Tyler absorbed them the way dry earth absorbed rain, desperate and total. "In Vietnam," Hawk said during one of these sessions, sitting in the shade of a rock outcropping while Tyler sprawled on the ground 20 yards away, "the enemy could smell Americans coming. We ate different food, used different soap, moved different through the jungle. The ones who survived learned to become invisible, not just to the eye, to everything, smell, sound, pattern. You had to think like the jungle itself." Tyler lifted his head from the dirt. "How long did it take you to learn that?" "My first tour, I was loud and stupid and lucky. My second tour, I was quieter and smarter and even luckier. My third tour, I understood that luck was just preparation meeting that opportunity, and I stopped relying on it." Hawk paused. "Your father only needed one tour to figure it out. He had instincts I had to learn the hard way." "Tell me about him," Tyler said. "About who he was before I knew him." Hawk was quiet for a long time, his eyes on the horizon, seeing things that weren't there anymore. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of memory. "Marcus was 23 when I met him in Iraq. Staff sergeant, already a scout sniper, already had more confirmed kills than men twice his age. But that's not what made him special. What made him special was that he cared about every single life he saved more than he cared about the lives he took. The old man shifted, his back complaining about too many years and too many injuries. We were in Fallujah, 2004. Urban combat. Hell on earth. Marcus and I were a sniper team. Him on the rifle, me on the scope. Our job was to cover Marine squads as they cleared buildings. One day we watched through our scope as a squad got pinned down by enemy fire. 3 Marines wounded, no way to extract them without getting cut to pieces. Tyler listened, hardly breathing. Marcus could have taken out the enemy's shooters, easy shots, 200 yards, clear sight lines. But he saw something I didn't. He saw that if we killed those shooters, the enemy would know we had a sniper team active and they'd relocate, disappear into the city. We'd save those 3 Marines but lose the chance to protect future squads. Hawk's jaw worked. He made the call. We didn't shoot. We sat there and watched those Marines bleed and radioed for air support instead. Took 40 minutes for the Apaches to arrive and suppress the enemy. Those 40 minutes aged me 10 years. Did the Marines survive? Tyler asked. 2 of them did. 1 bled out before the medic could get to him. Hawk looked at Tyler. After the mission, that Marine squad leader came to find us. I thought he was going to take a swing at Marcus for not helping sooner. Instead, he shook Marcus's hand and thanked him. Said if we'd given away our position, his whole squad would have died in the follow-up ambush. Marcus's patience saved 11 lives at the cost of 1. Tyler processed this, the weight of it settling in his gut like lead. How did he live with that? The same way we all did. By remembering that in war, you don't get to choose between good and bad. You choose between bad and worse, and you live with the consequences. Hawk stood up, joints creaking. That's what I'm teaching you now. How to make the hard choices. How to be patient when every instinct screams to act. Your father learned it. You can too. That evening, Hawk pulled a rifle from his gun safe that Tyler hadn't seen before. An older model, worn but immaculately maintained, with custom modifications that spoke of professional use. The scope was a Schmidt & Bender, top of the line, and the stock had been carved to fit a specific shooter's dimensions. This was your father's, Hawk said, holding the rifle like a religious relic. He left it with me before his last deployment. Said if anything happened, I should find someone worthy to carry it. He handed it to Tyler. I think he'd want you to have it. Tyler took the rifle with trembling hands. The weight was different from the Savage, heavier and more balanced, like it had been built with purpose. He could see wear marks on the stock where his father's hands had gripped it. Could imagine Marcus looking through this same scope, making the impossible shots that defined him. I can't, Tyler said, his voice breaking. I'm not good enough. Not yet, Hawk agreed. But you will be. That's why we train. That's why we practice. So when the moment comes, you're ready. He paused. Your father would have wanted you to earn it, so that's what you're going to do. The next morning brought a development that changed everything. Sheriff Bolton's Crown Vic appeared at 700 earlier than usual, driving fast enough to kick up a rooster tail of dust. Hawk and Tyler were on the porch, coffee in hand, and they both saw Bolton's expression before he even got out of the vehicle. Something was wrong. Got intel from Border Patrol, Bolton said without preamble. Cartel's moving a group of girls tomorrow night. 1,800 hours. From the compound to Juarez. If Isabella is in that group, this is our window. Maria had come to this door listening. Her face went pale. Tomorrow, we're not ready. Hawk's expression didn't change. We work with the time we have, not the time we want. He looked at Tyler. How many days have you been training? 8, Tyler replied. How many hours on the rifle? Maybe 40. In Vietnam, some Marines got sent into combat with less. In Iraq, we trained for months and still weren't ready for what we found. Hawk's eyes locked on Tyler's. Ready is a myth. You prepare as best you can, then you execute. That's all there is. Bolton spread more satellite photos on the kitchen table. These ones recent, maybe taken yesterday. The compound has 12 visible hostiles, probably more inside. Heavy weapons, radios. They're professionals, not street thugs. You go in loud, you die. You go in quiet, you might have a chance. Hawk studied the photos with the intensity of a man reading a battlefield, his decades of experience translating images into tactical reality. What about air support? Surveillance? Officially, I can't help you cross the border to conduct what amounts to a military operation on foreign soil, Bolton said. Unofficially, I'll have a Border Patrol drone in the area doing routine surveillance. If you need emergency extraction, I can have a team at the border in 20 minutes. But James, if this goes sideways, it goes very sideways. The State Department will disavow, the Mexican government will scream, and you'll be on your own. Understood, Hawk said. We'll need a vehicle, something that won't stand out. Father Santos has a truck we can use, Maria offered. It looks like every other truck in the area. Hawk nodded. Good, we stage at the church tonight. Tomorrow we conduct final reconnaissance and confirm Isabella is in the group. If she is, we extract her during the transfer to the transport vehicles. Hit them when they're most vulnerable, when they're focused on logistics instead of security. Tyler felt his heart hammering against his ribs. This was real. Tomorrow night he'd be in hostile territory, facing armed cartel members, trying to rescue a woman he'd never met because it was the right thing to do. Every instinct screamed that he wasn't ready, that 8 days of training wasn't enough, that he was going to get himself killed and maybe get Hawk killed too. Then he remembered his father's letter, the one that talked about fear being natural but not letting it control you. The one that said courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to act anyway. I'm in, Tyler said. Hawk's expression softened just slightly, pride flashing across his weathered features. I know you are. Your father would be too. They spent the rest of the day preparing. Hawk pulled gear from storage that Tyler hadn't known existed. Night vision optics, tactical vests, communication equipment. The accumulation of a career spent in places where the right equipment meant the difference between mission success and body bags. Each piece of gear was maintained perfectly, despite years of storage, oiled and functional and ready. When did you last use this stuff? Tyler asked, holding up a set of night vision goggles that looked military grade. Officially, I never used any of it, Hawk replied. Unofficially, some Marines never really retire. They just go on inactive status. Bolton left them with a radio frequency and a promise of support if things went completely wrong. Maria packed a bag with clothes and supplies for her sister, her hands shaking with hope and terror in equal measure. Hawk went through his pre-mission ritual, the same one he'd done before every operation in Vietnam and Iraq, checking and rechecking every piece of equipment until he was satisfied nothing would fail at the critical moment. As the sun set, Hawk called Tyler to the range one more time. Final test, he said. 500 yards. Moving. Target. One shot. Show me you're ready. Tyler settled into position behind Marcus's rifle, the weight now familiar in his hands, the scope clarity perfect. 500 yards downrange, Hawk had set up a mechanical target, a steel plate on a track that moved left to right at walking speed. An impossible shot a week ago, a difficult shot now, but Tyler had been making difficult shots all week, and each one had taught him something. He watched the target move through his scope, calculated the lead, accounted for the slight evening breeze, found his breathing rhythm, let everything else fall away until there was only the rifle and the target in the space between them where the bullet would travel. Squeeze. The rifle spoke. The plate sang, dead center on a moving target at 500 yards. Hawk nodded once. You're ready. That night, they loaded into Father Santos's truck and drove south toward the border, toward the church that would be their staging area, toward the mission that would test everything Hawk had taught and everything Tyler had learned. Maria rode in the back seat, rosary beads clicking through her fingers, praying in Spanish. Tyler rode shotgun, Marcus's rifle between his knees, his heart in his throat. Hawk drove in silence, his eyes on the road, his mind probably already running through the mission parameters, identifying variables and contingencies in the 1,000 ways things could go wrong. Tyler watched him, this old warrior who'd promised a dying friend to watch over his son, and was now taking that son into danger to teach him what it meant to be a man. Are you scared? Tyler asked. Hawk glanced at him. Always, fear keeps you sharp. It's panic that kills you. Remember that tomorrow. Feel the fear. Use it. Don't let it use you. They reached the church at 2200 hours, a small adobe structure that had stood in the desert for 100 years, ministering to people who needed hope more than they needed comfort. Father Santos met them in the darkness, his face grave but determined. The room and back is yours, he said. I will keep watch. May God protect you in what you do tomorrow. Amen, Hawk replied, and Tyler realized it was the first time he'd heard the old man acknowledge anything resembling faith. They slept in shifts, Tyler taking the first watch from 2200 to 0200, Hawk taking the second until dawn. Tyler sat in the darkness of the church, surrounded by icons and candles in the smell of incense, thinking about his father, about the choices Marcus had made, the lives he'd saved, the price he'd paid, about the rifle that now leaned against the wall, waiting to speak again in defense of the innocent. Somewhere in that darkness, Tyler stopped being a kid who'd lost his way and started being something else, something harder, something focused. Not a warrior yet, but maybe the beginning of one. Dawn came at 5:37, and with it came the knowledge that in 12 hours, everything would change. Either they'd save Isabella and prove that good men could still win against evil, or they'd fail, and Tyler would learn the hardest lesson of all, that sometimes courage and training and good intentions weren't enough. Hawk was already awake when Tyler checked on him, sitting in the pre-dawn darkness, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee, eyes distant. "My wife used to ask me why I did it," Hawk said without preamble. "Why I kept going back to war when I could have stayed home. I told her it was duty, honor, all the words that sound good and mean something but don't really explain it." He sipped his coffee. "The truth is simpler. I did it because I was good at it and because there were people who needed someone to be good at it. Not glory, not adventure, just the knowledge that if I didn't stand on that wall, someone else would have to. Someone maybe not as prepared, not as trained, and they might fail where I might succeed." Tyler understood then. This wasn't about rescuing one woman or teaching one kid. This was about Hawk doing what he'd always done, standing on the wall, being the thing that evil had to go through to get to the innocent. "Thank you," Tyler said, "for everything you've taught me, for keeping your promise to my father." Hawk looked at him, and for just a moment, the old warrior's mask slipped, and something like love showed through. "Your father kept me alive when I should have died. This is the least I can do. And Tyler, he'd be proud of you. I'm sure of that." The day passed in preparation and waiting, the slow torture of hours before action. Hawk conducted a final equipment check. Tyler cleaned his rifle for the fourth time, not because it needed it, but because it gave his hands something to do. Maria prayed and paced and tried not to think about all the ways this could end badly. At 1600 hours, they loaded into the truck and began the drive toward the observation point Hawk had selected from the maps, a ridge 3/4 of a mile from the cartel compound that would give them clear sight lines and good concealment. The desert was hot and still, the kind of afternoon where the air itself seemed to be waiting for something to happen. Tyler rode in silence, his mind running through everything Hawk had taught him. Breathing, trigger control, wind reading, the fundamentals that would either save lives or fail at the critical moment. His hands were steady on the rifle, his breathing was controlled. But inside, his heart was a war drum, pounding out a rhythm that said, "This is real, this is real, this is real." They reached the ridge at 1700 hours and set up the observation post with military precision. Hawk arranged the spotting scope and binoculars to cover different angles. Tyler positioned himself with the rifle, ready to provide cover fire if needed. Maria stayed low, her eyes fixed on the compound below, where somewhere in those buildings her sister might be waiting, praying, hoping for rescue that she didn't know was coming. Through the scope, Tyler could see the compound clearly. A main building, concrete and fortified. 2 smaller outbuildings. A vehicle yard with 3 trucks. Men moving with the casual alertness of people who were armed and knew it. 12 visible hostiles, like Bolton had said. Maybe more inside. At 1745 hours, the compound came alive. Men emerged from the main building, shouting orders, organizing. A truck backed up to the entrance. Tyler's breath caught. Through the scope, he watched as women were led out of the building, maybe 8 or 10 of them, their hands zip-tied, their faces marked with fear and resignation. Maria gasped. "Isabella, the third one, that's my sister." Hawk confirmed through the spotting scope. "Positive identification, the target is in play. Now we wait for our window." The cartel loaded the women into the truck bed, 2 guards climbing in with them, automatic weapons visible. More guards took positions in a lead vehicle and a chase vehicle, a convoy forming to move the human cargo north toward Juarez and whatever hell waited there. Hawk's voice was calm, professional, the voice of a man who'd done this 100 times before. "Tyler, if this goes to guns, your job is to protect Maria and get her to the extraction point. I'll handle the enemy. Clear?" "Clear," Tyler said, even as his mind screamed that there was no way one old man could handle 12 armed hostiles. The convoy started moving, kicking up dust as it headed toward the dirt road that would take them north. Hawk tracked them through the scope, counting seconds, measuring distances, calculating the 1,000 variables that would determine success or failure. Then everything went wrong in the way things always went wrong when bullets started flying. The lead truck hit something in the road, an improvised speed bump, or maybe just a rock, and swerved. The driver overcorrected. The truck left the road and rolled, once, twice, coming to rest on its side in a cloud of dust and the screaming of injured men. The transport truck carrying the women hit the brakes hard, its tires locking up. The chase vehicle stopped short. Chaos. Pure chaos. Guards shouting, trying to respond to a situation they hadn't trained for. The women in the transport truck were screaming. One of the guards had been thrown clear of the lead vehicle and wasn't moving. Hawk's voice cut through Tyler's shock. Windows open. We move now. And just like that, the training was over and the war had begun. The chaos below them unfolded like a training scenario, except the bullets were real and the screaming carried across 3/4 of a mile with a clarity that made Tyler's stomach turn. The lead truck lay on its side, steam hissing from its ruptured radiator, two guards crawling from the wreckage with blood streaming down their faces. This transport truck had stopped 20 yards behind, its driver frozen in confusion, the guards in back yelling contradictory orders while the women huddled in terror. The chase vehicle's doors flew open and 4 men emerged with rifles, their training kicking in even as their situation fell apart. Hawk's hands moved across his equipment with the precision of a surgeon, checking radio frequencies, confirming sight lines, his mind already 3 steps ahead of the evolving situation. Tyler, range to transport truck. Tyler's scope found the vehicle, his training taking over despite the adrenaline flooding his system. 740 yards, wind negligible, clear shot to driver's side. Good. Maria, stay down and stay quiet. If shooting starts, you keep your head below this ridgeline. Understand? Maria nodded, her rosary beads clicking faster, prayers spilling from her lips in Spanish. Tyler could see her sister in the back of the transport truck through his scope, Isabella's face marked with bruises and fear, her hands zip tight in front of her. So close. 740 yards was nothing. Tyler had made that shot a dozen times on the range. But the range didn't have armed guards and innocent hostages and 1,000 ways for everything to go catastrophically wrong. Hawk spoke into the radio, his voice calm and professional. Bolton, we have situation development. Convoy accident. Multiple hostiles exposed. Requesting surveillance confirmation on enemy count. Bolton's voice crackled back through the speaker. Drone overhead. Confirming 12 hostiles total. Repeat, 1-2 hostiles. 4 at the chase vehicle, 2 in transport truck, 6 emerging from compound to provide support. You are heavily outnumbered. Copy that, Hawk replied, standing by for opportunity. Tyler watched through his scope as the 6 men from the compound reached the accident site, automatic weapons at the ready, their movements professional despite the chaos. Not street thugs, trained operators, cartel soldiers who knew their business and did it well. The kind of men who'd killed before and would kill again without hesitation. The head man, tall and lean with the bearing of a military officer, began organizing the chaos into order, pointing, directing, getting the situation under control. Tyler watched him through the crosshairs and recognized competence when he saw it. This man was dangerous, more dangerous than the others because he was thinking while they were reacting. That's Carlos Mendez, Maria whispered, her voice tight with terror. El Víbora, the Viper. He runs the trafficking operation. If he's here, this shipment is important. Hawk's expression didn't change, but Tyler saw his hands pause for just a fraction of a second. How do you know him? He was there. When did they kill the coyote? When I ran. He saw my face. Maria's breathing was rapid, panic edging into her voice. If he recognizes me, if he knows I'm here, he'll never stop hunting me. Tyler felt the weight of that knowledge settle onto the mission like a physical thing. This wasn't just about rescuing Isabella anymore. It was about protecting Maria from a man who had the resources and the will to hunt her across borders and years. The stakes had just multiplied. Below them, Mendez had restored order. The women were being transferred from the damaged transport truck to the chase vehicle, 3 guards watching them with weapons ready. The other guards were pulling their injured comrades from the wreckage, checking for serious wounds, reorganizing their convoy with the efficiency of men who'd done this before. Hawk watched it all through his spotting scope, his face carved from stone, his mind calculating odds and options. Finally, he keyed the radio again. "Bolton, we need a diversion, something to pull their attention long enough for an extraction attempt." "Negative," Bolton's voice came back. "Can't risk international incident with direct action. You're on your own." Hawk's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. Rules were rules, even when they were stupid. He switched frequencies, called Father Santos at the church. "Miguel, I need you to do something that might get you in trouble." The priest's voice was steady. "I am already in trouble, my friend. What do you need?" "In 30 minutes, I need you to call the Mexican authorities. Report suspicious activity at the compound. Armed men, possible drug operation. Give them enough information to send a patrol, but not enough to identify your source. They will come with sirens, with lights. They will scare everyone away," Santos protested. "That's what I'm counting on," Hawk replied. 30 minutes. Can you do it?" A pause, then Santos sighed. "May God forgive us both. 30 minutes. Hawk turned to Tyler. "We have a window. When the Mexican police arrive, Mendez will bug out. He won't risk a confrontation with law enforcement when he's carrying human cargo. He'll scatter, move the girls to a backup location, reorganize later. In that chaos, we extract Isabella and Maria's friend Sophia." Tyler's scope had found another face in the group of captives, a young woman he recognized from campus, someone who disappeared 2 months ago. The missing roommate, Maria's friend. "Sophia Martinez," he said. "She's there too." Maria's gasp was audible. "Sophia, oh God, Sophia is alive?" Hawk's expression shifted, some internal calculation adjusting to new variables. "Can you identify anyone else? Anyone who shouldn't be there?" Maria moved to the spotting scope, her hands shaking as she scanned the faces of the captive women. "Isabella, Sophia, that girl, I don't know her name, but I've seen her at the university. And her. Her voice broke. "They're all so young." Tyler felt something cold and hard settling in his chest. This wasn't just about saving one woman or two women. This was about breaking a machine that consumed young lives and spit out broken souls. This was about drawing a line and saying no further. This was about what his father would have done, what Hawk had spent a lifetime doing. Standing against evil, not because victory was certain, but because the alternative was unthinkable. "We get them all," Tyler said. Hawk looked at him, something like pride and sorrow mixing in his weathered face. "Son, there are 8 women down there and 12 armed guards. The math doesn't work." "Then we change the math," Tyler replied. "You taught me that. Find the weakness, exploit it, make the impossible possible." For a long moment, Hawk said nothing. Then he nodded once, sharp and final. "All right, we do this smart, we do this fast, and we do this without getting anyone killed, especially us." The next 25 minutes passed like hours. Tyler and Hawk refined their plan, identifying positions, calculating angles, preparing for every contingency they could imagine, and accepting that the ones they couldn't imagine would probably be the ones that killed them. Maria stayed low, praying, crying, hoping. At the compound, Mendez had reorganized his convoy. The women were loaded into 2 vehicles now instead of 1, splitting the cargo to reduce risk. 6 guards remained, the others having returned to the compound. Tyler watched Mendez through his scope and saw the man check his watch, speak into a radio, scan the horizon with the wariness of someone who'd survived in a dangerous business by never feeling safe. Then, distant but growing closer, came the sound of sirens. Mendez's head snapped up, his body language shifting from controlled to urgent in an instant. He shouted orders, and the compound exploded into motion. Guards running, vehicles starting, the controlled operation becoming a scramble to evacuate before the Mexican Federal Police arrived. Hawk keyed his radio. "Miguel, you beautiful bastard, they're moving." The convoy split, one vehicle heading north with 4 women, the other heading east with 4 more, the guards dividing their forces to protect both groups. Mendez climbed into the northbound vehicle, his leadership staying with what he clearly considered the higher value cargo. Tyler's scope tracked Isabella in that vehicle, watched her terrified face disappear behind tinted windows. "We take the north convoy," Hawk said. "They're heading toward the border. That gives us options." They scrambled down from the ridge, moving fast but controlled. Years of training keeping Hawk's old joints functional, and Tyler's young enthusiasm channeled into efficiency instead of panic. Maria followed, stumbling on the loose rock, tears streaming down her face. They reached Father Santos's truck in 4 minutes, piled in, Hawk behind the wheel with Tyler riding shotgun and Maria in back. The engine roared to life, and they were moving, following the dust trail of Mendez's convoy from a distance that kept them invisible but left them close enough to react. The desert flowed past in shades of brown and gold, the afternoon sun hammering down, heat waves making the horizon shimmer like a mirage. Tyler's hands gripped his father's rifle, his mind running through scenarios, calculating shots he might have to make, praying he wouldn't have to make any of them. Hawk drove like a man half his age, the old warrior rising to the surface, his face set in lines of concentration and determination. "Tyler, check the map. Where's this road go?" Tyler unfolded the topographical map Bolton had provided, traced the route with his finger. North for 12 miles, then it intersects with Highway 2. From there, Mendez can go east toward Agua Prieta or west toward Nogales. Either way, he hits a border crossing in 90 minutes. He won't risk a crossing with cargo, Hawk said. He'll have a safe house. Somewhere to wait until the heat dies down. Somewhere close to the border, but not on it. Maria leaned forward from the back seat. "There's an abandoned ranch 20 miles from here. My uncle used to work there before the cartel took it over. They use it for storage, weapons, drugs, maybe people too." Hawk glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "Or, you know how to find it?" "I think so. If we reach the highway, I can guide you." They drove in silence for 10 minutes, eating up the distance between them and Mendez's convoy, close enough now that Tyler could see the dust cloud ahead, far enough that they didn't register as a threat. The radio crackled, Bolton's voice cutting through the engine noise. "Hawk, be advised. We're picking up radio traffic. Mendez called for reinforcements. You've got additional hostiles inbound from Agua Prieta. ETA 40 minutes. Whatever you're planning, do it fast." "Copy," Hawk replied, and Tyler heard the weight in that single word, 40 minutes. That was their window. After that, they'd be outnumbered and outgunned with no backup and no way out. The convoy ahead slowed, turned onto a dirt track that led toward a cluster of buildings barely visible in the distance. Maria pointed, "There, that's the ranch." Hawk pulled off the road, found cover behind a low rise that concealed the truck from casual observation. He killed the engine and the silence rushed in, broken only by the tick of cooling metal in Maria's ragged breathing. Through binoculars, Tyler could see the ranch compound. Main house, barn, 3 outbuildings, Mendez's vehicles pulling into the yard. Guards deploying with military precision, establishing a perimeter, securing the location. 6 guards, Tyler counted. Mendez makes 7, 3-to-1 odds. "I've had worse," Hawk said quietly. Then he pulled something from his pack that made Tyler's eyes widen. A radio scanner, old but functional, the kind intelligence officers use to eavesdrop on enemy communications. Hawk tuned it to the frequency the cartel was using, and suddenly they could hear Mendez's voice, calm and professional, giving orders in rapid Spanish. Maria translated. "He's telling them to secure the women in the barn. He's calling the Agua Prieta team, telling them to hurry. He's saying something about—" She paused, her face going pale. "He's saying he saw someone watching from the ridge. He thinks someone was observing the convoy accident. He's telling his men to be alert for an attack." Hawk and Tyler exchanged a look. They'd been made. Maybe not identified, but Mendez knew someone was out there. That changed everything. "We can't wait for darkness," Hawk said. "He'll have 20 men here in less than an hour. We hit now or we don't hit at all." Tyler felt his pulse hammering in his throat. This wasn't the plan. The plan involved careful reconnaissance, waiting for the right moment, minimizing risk. This was a frontal assault against a prepared enemy with civilian hostages in the crossfire. This was suicide. Then he thought about Isabella, zip-tied in a barn, waiting to be sold to the highest bidder. Thought about Sophia and the other women whose only crime was wanting a better life. Thought about his father making the hard choice in Fallujah, accepting casualties to save more lives later. Sometimes you didn't get good options. Sometimes you only got bad and worse. "I'm in," Tyler said. Hawk nodded slowly. "Maria, you stay with the truck. If we're not back in 30 minutes, you drive north until you hit the border and you don't stop. Promise me." Maria grabbed Hawk's arm. "You're going to die down there." "Maybe," Hawk agreed, "but we're going to die saving your sister and your friend instead of living with ourselves if we don't try. That's worth something." He pulled a satellite phone from his pack, dialed Sheriff Bolton. "Ray, we're going loud. Whatever happens in the next 30 minutes, you make sure Maria Flores gets across the border safely. That's the mission now. Everything else is secondary. Bolton's voice came back tight with concern. James, don't do this. Wait for backup. We can coordinate something. No time, Hawk replied. If I don't make it out, tell Tyler's grandmother that he died like his father, with honor, protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. He ended the call before Bolton could argue, turned to Tyler with an expression that was part resignation and part fierce joy. Your father and I used to do this in Iraq. Two-man teams against bad odds. We called it Tuesday. His weathered face cracked into something that might have been a smile. You ready for your first Tuesday? Tyler checked his rifle, the weapon his father had carried, the tool that had saved lives and ended them in service of something larger than one man's survival. I was born ready. They moved out, leaving Maria crying in the truck, moving low and fast through the scrubland that surrounded the ranch. Hawk took point, his old body moving with a grace that defied his years, decades of training overriding the complaints of age and injury. Tyler followed, matching the older man's pace, his rifle ready, his breathing controlled, everything Hawk had taught him coming together in this moment. 300 yards from the ranch, Hawk stopped behind a boulder, pulled out his rangefinder. Tyler, see that water tower? Tyler found it in his scope, old metal structure, maybe 40 feet high, positioned at the northwest corner of the compound. I see it. That's your position. Get up there, you'll have overwatch on the entire compound. You can cover me while I move in for the extraction. You're going in alone? Tyler's voice cracked. That's suicide. No, that's tactics. One man moving can stay invisible. Two men make twice the noise and twice the signature. Hawk's eyes locked on Tyler's. Your job is to watch my back. If a guard gets a bead on me, you take him down. If I give the signal, you put rounds down range to cover our escape. But Tyler, listen to me. You do not shoot unless you have a clear shot. You do not risk hitting the hostages, understand? Tyler understood. He also understood that Hawk was giving him the safer job, the one that kept him out of close quarters combat, the one that a father would give a son if he wanted that son to survive. What about you? Who covers you when you're in the barn? God, hopefully, Hawk said. And if he's busy, then I'll just have to be very good and very lucky. He clasped Tyler's shoulder, the grip firm and final. Your father would be proud of you. I want you to know that. Then he was moving, circling toward the east side of the compound, using the terrain for cover, disappearing into the landscape the way only a man with 3 tours in Vietnam could disappear. Tyler watched him go, felt the weight of responsibility settle onto his shoulders like a physical thing, then turned and began his approach to the water tower. The climb took 4 minutes, each step carefully placed, his boots finding purchase on the old ladder's rungs, his rifle slung across his back. At the top, Tyler settled into position, using the tower's metal framework for support, his scope sweeping across the compound below. From this vantage point, he could see everything. The main house where Mendez had established his command post, the barn where the women were being held, the outbuildings where guards smoked cigarettes and checked their weapons, the perimeter where 2 men walked patrol routes with the boredom of soldiers who'd done this 1,000 times. Tyler's scope found Hawk, just a flicker of movement at the compound's edge, invisible unless you knew where to look. The old warrior was working his way toward the barn, using shadows and blind spots, moving when the guards weren't looking, freezing when they were. It was beautiful in a terrible way. Watching a master at work, seeing decades of training and experience translate into an almost supernatural ability to be invisible in plain sight. Then everything fell apart. A dog barked. Tyler hadn't seen it, hadn't accounted for it, and neither had Hawk. The German shepherd appeared from behind the barn, nose to the ground, tracking the scent of an intruder. It found Hawk's trail and began barking, the sound shattering the afternoon quiet, bringing guards running with weapons raised. Hawk broke cover, sprinting for the barn, knowing his invisibility was gone and speed was his only option now. Guards shouted, raised rifles, began firing. Tyler's scope found the nearest guard, crosshairs settling on center mass, his finger taking up slack on the trigger. 720 yards, slight wind from the west, moving target. Breathe, squeeze. The rifle spoke, and the guard went down. Tyler's first kill, a man's life ending, because Tyler Rivera decided it should end. No time to process that. No time for guilt or horror or humanity. Just the next target, the next threat, the next guard trying to kill the old man who'd promised Tyler's father to watch over his son. Tyler fired again and again, working the bolt with mechanical precision, chambering rounds, finding targets, making shots that a week ago would have been impossible and today were necessary. Guards fell or dove for cover, their return fire wild and panicked, not knowing where the sniper was, not knowing how many attackers they faced. Hawk reached the barn, kicked in the door, disappeared inside. Tyler kept shooting, keeping the guards pinned, buying seconds that might mean the difference between success and failure. His magazine ran dry and he reloaded, muscle memory from 1,000 repetitions on Hawk's range, making his hands blur through the motion. Then Mendez appeared, and Tyler's blood went cold. The cartel leader emerged from the main house with a radio in one hand and a pistol in the other, his face carved with fury, his eyes scanning the compound for threats. He shouted orders, and the remaining guards began organizing, their panic crystallizing into professional response. Mendez pointed toward the water tower, toward Tyler's position, and Tyler realized with sinking horror that his muzzle flash had given him away. Rounds began impacting the water tower, steel pinging and sparking, bullets finding their way through gaps in the framework. Tyler kept his head down, kept shooting when he could, but the advantage was gone now. Mendez's men knew where he was. They were laying down, suppressing fire while others maneuvered to flank. Inside the barn, Hawk had found the women. Tyler could see them through a gap in the barn side wall, 8 terrified faces, zip-tied hands, Hawk cutting them free with a knife while trying to explain over the sound of gunfire that he was there to help. Isabella recognized him somehow, maybe from photos Maria had shown her, and she began organizing the others, getting them ready to move. But there was no way out. The guards had the barn surrounded. Even if Hawk got the women free, they'd never make it 20 yards before being cut down. Tyler's radio crackled, Hawk's voice breathing hard, speaking fast. "Tyler, I need you to do something. I need you to make them believe there's more of us than there is. Pick a target and work it. Make noise. Make them think we've got a whole team out here." Tyler understood. Psychological warfare. Make the enemy see ghosts. Hear threats that didn't exist. Believe they were outnumbered when the opposite was true. He shifted his aim to the main house, put 3 rounds through the windows in rapid succession, then shifted to a guard position and fired twice, then shifted again to a parked vehicle and punched holes through its engine block. Moving his point of aim, creating the illusion of multiple shooters, each shot deliberate and placed to maximize psychological impact. It worked. Mendez's voice over the radio, shouting in Spanish, Maria's translation coming through Tyler's earpiece because she'd insisted on monitoring the frequency. He thinks there's a team. He's calling for the Agua Prieta reinforcements. He's telling them to hurry. But the reinforcements were still 30 minutes out, and Mendez didn't have 30 minutes. He had to make a choice. Stay and fight against an unknown number of attackers, risking his men and his cargo. Or cut his losses, evacuate, live to traffic another day. Tyler watched through his scope as Mendez made his decision. The cartel leader shouted orders, pointed toward the vehicles, began organizing a retreat. The guards laid down covering fire and ran for the trucks, their discipline cracking under pressure, their professionalism giving way to the survival instinct that told them this fight wasn't worth their lives. Engines roared, vehicles moved. The cartel was evacuating, leaving the women behind, choosing operational survival over holding ground. Tyler kept shooting, not to kill now, but to encourage their departure, to make sure they kept running and didn't change their minds. Then, just as Tyler thought it was over, Mendez did something that changed everything. The cartel leader ran toward the barn, pistol raised, screaming in Spanish. Tyler's scope found him, crosshairs settling on the man's center mass, finger taking up trigger slack. An easy shot, 300 yards, minimal win, clear sightline. But Tyler didn't shoot, couldn't shoot, because Mendez had grabbed one of the women as a human shield, dragging her out of the barn with a gun to her head. Sophia, the roommate, the friend Maria had thought was dead. Mendez's voice carried across the compound, shouting in English now. "I know you're out there. I know you're watching. You want this girl alive, you let me walk. You shoot, she dies." Tyler's crosshairs wavered. He could make the shot, had made harder shots on the range. But the range didn't have hostages. The range didn't have a scared young woman's life hanging on split-second timing and millimeter precision. Hawk's voice in his ear, calm despite the chaos. Tyler, I need you to trust everything I taught you. I need you to make the shot your father would make. The hard shot, the one that matters. Tyler's breathing steadied. His crosshairs found the target, not Mendez's body, but his head, the only part exposed behind Sophia's terrified form. 9 inches of target, maybe less, at 300 yards with a hostage's life depending on perfection. Everything Hawk had taught him came together in that moment. Breathing, trigger control, wind reading, patience. The fundamentals building on each other until there was no difference between the shooter and the rifle in the bullet's path to the target. Tyler squeezed the trigger. The rifle spoke its final word. 300 yards away, Carlos Mendez's head snapped back, and he fell, his pistol clattering to the dirt, his threat ending in the fraction of a second between Tyler's decision and his bullet's arrival. Sophia stood frozen, covered in blood that wasn't hers, her mouth open in a scream that Tyler couldn't hear over the ringing in his ears. Then Hawk was there, pulling her back into the barn, organizing the women, getting them moving toward the truck, while Tyler provided overwatch and tried not to think about the fact that he'd just killed a man with a headshot at 300 yards. The extraction took 8 minutes that felt like 8 hours. Hawk moving the women in pairs, using cover, keeping them low. Tyler covering their movement, his scope scanning for threats that never materialized because the cartel guards had fled and weren't coming back without reinforcements. When the last woman was clear of the compound, Hawk's voice came through the radio. "Tyler exfil, now, meet at the truck." Tyler climbed down from the water tower on legs that shook with adrenaline come down, his hands steady on the rifle, but his mind beginning to process what he'd done. He'd killed 2 men, maybe 3. He'd taken human lives, ended futures, made wives into widows and children into orphans. The weight of that sat in his stomach like lead. He reached the truck to find 8 women huddled in the bed, Maria embracing her sister, tears streaming down both their faces. Hawk was behind the wheel, his face grim, blood on his shirt from a wound Tyler hadn't seen him take. The old warrior nodded once when Tyler climbed in. "You did good, son. Your father would be proud." Then they were driving, the truck's engine screaming as Hawk pushed it toward the border, towards safety, toward the end of this particular nightmare. Behind them, sirens wailed as Mexican federal police finally arrived at the ranch, too late to help, just in time to find the bodies and wonder what the hell had happened here. Tyler sat in silence, his father's rifle across his lap, blood drying on his hands, his mind replaying the shots over and over. The guards falling, Mendez's head snapping back, the weight of killing settling into his soul like a stone dropping into dark water. They crossed the border at an unmonitored point Bolton had arranged, American soil greeting them with the same indifferent desert that covered the Mexican side. Sheriff Bolton was waiting with Border Patrol agents and paramedics, taking custody of the rescued women, documenting their stories, beginning the long process of healing trauma that would never fully heal. Isabella and Sophia clung to Maria, 3 young women who'd survived hell and couldn't quite believe they were safe. The others sat in shocked silence, wrapped in emergency blankets, drinking water, trying to process freedom after imprisonment. Bolton pulled Hawk aside, his face grave. "James, what you did down there, that's going to have consequences. International ones. The State Department is already screaming. The Mexican government is demanding answers." "Let them demand," Hawk said quietly. "We saved 8 lives today. That's the only answer that matters." Bolton looked at Tyler, at the young man sitting in the truck bed with a 1,000-yard stare and blood on his hands. "What about him? He's 19 years old. He's killed men. That's going to change him." "It already has," Hawk replied. "Now comes the hard part, teaching him to live with it." As the sun set over the New Mexico desert, casting everything in shades of gold and shadow, Tyler sat alone and tried to understand what he'd become. Not a boy anymore, not quite a man. Something in between. Something forged in violence and tempered in necessity. Something his father had been before him. Hawk limped over, his wound bandaged now, his face showing every one of his 68 years. He sat beside Tyler without speaking. 2 warriors in the gathering darkness, each carrying weights the other understood. "Does it get easier?" Tyler asked finally. "No," Hawk said. "You just get better at carrying it." They sat in silence as the stars came out. And somewhere in that vast night sky, Tyler imagined his father Marcus looking down, proud and sad and understanding, because he'd walked this same path and knew exactly where it led. The boy who'd arrived at Hawk's ranch angry and lost was gone now. replaced by someone who'd learned the terrible truth that being a warrior meant making choices that would haunt you forever. But it also meant standing between evil and innocence, between predators and prey, and choosing to be the shield even when the cost was measured in pieces of your soul. Tyler had made that choice today, and God help him, he'd make it again if he had to. That was what his father's rifle had taught him. That was what Hawk's training had prepared him for. That was the marksman's code, written not in rules but in the awful responsibility of being the one who could make the shot when it mattered most. The night deepened and Tyler kept watch, because someone had to, and now he knew that someone was him. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and failure, the kind of place where bodies were patched up but souls stayed broken. Tyler sat in the waiting room at University Medical Center in El Paso, his hands still shaking from adrenaline that had nowhere to go, watching doctors and nurses move with practiced efficiency through corridors that had seen too much violence and not enough healing. Hawk was in surgery, the bullet wound in his shoulder more serious than he'd let on, bone fragments and torn muscle that required a surgeon's skill to repair. 3 hours in the operating room, 3 hours of Tyler sitting alone with his thoughts and the memory of men falling through his rifle scope. Sheriff Bolton had stayed for the first hour, making phone calls, coordinating with Border Patrol, dealing with the political fallout from an unauthorized operation on Mexican soil that had killed 4 cartel members and rescued 8 trafficking victims. The math worked in their favor, but math wasn't politics, and politics didn't care about 8 young women who got to go home to their families. Politics cared about international incidents and diplomatic protests and maintaining relationships with a neighboring government that was already screaming about American vigilantes operating south of the border. State Department wants you in Washington for debriefing, Bolton had said before he left. They're not happy, but they're also not stupid enough to prosecute the kid who saved 8 lives. You'll get a slap on the wrist, a lecture about sovereignty, and they'll file the whole thing under operations that never happened. Tyler had nodded without really hearing. His mind was still in that compound, still looking through the scope at Mendez's head, still feeling the trigger break and watching a human being stop being human in the fraction of a second between decision and consequence. He'd killed 3 men today. The number sat in his consciousness like a tumor, growing every time he closed his eyes and saw their faces. Isabella and Sophia and the other women were in a different part of the hospital, being examined, being documented, beginning the long process of testifying against a cartel that would want them dead for cooperating. Maria was with them, holding her sister's hand, crying tears of relief and trauma, grateful to be alive but changed forever by everything that had happened. Tyler had saved them. That should have felt good, should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like he'd traded pieces of himself for their freedom, and he wasn't sure the exchange rate was sustainable. The surgery finished at 2,300 hours. A doctor emerged, still in her scrubs, exhaustion written across her face in lines that said she'd been saving lives all day and was running on fumes and determination. She found Tyler in the waiting room, recognized him from Bolton's description. "Mr. Rivera, your uncle is out of surgery. We removed the bullet, repaired the damage. He's stable. Lucky man, another inch to the left, and he'd have bled out before reaching the hospital." Tyler didn't correct her about the uncle designation. Let her think whatever made the paperwork easier. "Can I see him?" "He's in recovery. Give him another hour." She paused, studying Tyler's face with the clinical assessment of someone trained to read trauma. "You should go home. Get some rest. You look like you've been through hell." "I'm not leaving," Tyler said. The doctor nodded, understanding something she didn't need explained, and walked away to save the next person who needed saving. Tyler went back to sitting, back to waiting, back to the endless loop of memory that wouldn't shut off. The sound of his rifle, the impact of bullets finding flesh, the weight of being 19 years old and already a killer. Hawk woke at 100 hours, groggy from anesthesia, but alert enough to recognize Tyler sitting in the chair beside his hospital bed. The old warrior tried to sit up, winced, settled back against the pillows with a grimace that said his body was reminding him he was 58 and not invincible. "You stayed," Hawk said, his voice rough from the breathing tube they'd pulled an hour ago. "Where else would I be?" Tyler replied. Hawk's eyes found Tyler's face, reading what was written there with the expertise of someone who'd seen that particular expression on too many young faces after too many firefights. "How are you holding up?" "I killed 3 men today," Tyler said. The words came out flat, emotionless, the kind of tone that meant the emotions were too big to fit into normal speech. I looked it through a scope and I ended their lives. Just like that. Like it was easy. Was it easy? Hawk asked. Pulling the trigger was easy. Living with it is hard. Hawk was quiet for a long moment, his weathered face showing every year of carrying similar weight. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of experience and the compassion of understanding. Your father came to me after his first kill, Iraq, 2003. He'd taken out an insurgent who was targeting a Marine patrol. Clean shot, professional, everything he'd been trained to do. But afterward, he couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, kept seeing the man's face in his mind. Tyler leaned forward. What did you tell him? I told him the truth, that taking a life changes you in ways that can't be undone, that you'll carry those men with you for the rest of your days. But I also told him to look at what his action prevented. That insurgent would have killed Marines, young men with families, with futures, with people who loved them. Marcus's shot saved those lives. Hawk paused. The men you killed today were trafficking women, selling human beings. They'd done it before, and they'd do it again if you hadn't stopped them. You can carry guilt for what you did, or you can carry pride for who you saved. Ideally, you carry both. That's what makes you human instead of a monster. I don't feel like a hero, Tyler said. Good, Hawk replied. The ones who feel like heroes are the ones who scare me. You did a hard thing because it needed doing. That's not heroism. That's just being a man when the world needs men. They sat in the hospital darkness, the only light coming from monitors that tracked Hawk's heartbeat and blood pressure. Proof that he was alive despite bullets and age and a lifetime of walking toward danger instead of away from it. Outside the window, El Paso sprawled across the desert, a city sleeping while two warriors processed the cost of protecting it. There's something else, Hawk said finally. Something you need to know about your father, about how he really died. Tyler felt his stomach tighten. You told me, I.e.D. in Afghanistan, he pushed you out of the way. That's true, but it's not the whole truth. Hawk's face was carved from stone, every line etched with pain that wasn't from his wound. We were on patrol in Helmand province, supporting a Marine squad clearing a village. Marcus was on overwatch. I was coordinating with the squad leader. Intel said the village was clear, but our gut said otherwise. Marcus wanted to pull the squad back, run more recon. I overruled him, told him we had a schedule to keep. The old man's hands were shaking now, 13 years of guilt finding its way to the surface. There was an IED hidden in a compound wall. The squad leader was about to breach when Marcus spotted the trigger wire. He called it out, started moving to pull the leader back. But the insurgent watching remotely detonated early. Marcus could have taken cover, should have taken cover. Instead, he pushed me and the squad leader clear. Took the blast himself. Tyler felt something cold spreading through his chest. You're saying my father died because you made the wrong call. I'm saying your father died being a better man than I was. I made a tactical mistake. He paid for it with his life. Hawk's eyes were wet now, the stone cracking to reveal raw grief underneath. I've spent 13 years trying to honor his sacrifice by keeping my promise to watch over you. But you deserve to know the truth. Your father died saving me from my own stupidity. The silence in that hospital room was total and terrible. Tyler processed the information, turned it over in his mind, tried to reconcile the father he'd imagined with the father who'd actually existed. A man who'd seen someone make a mistake and instead of letting them die for it, had chosen to die himself. That was Marcus Rivera. That was the legacy Tyler carried. He wouldn't want you to blame yourself, Tyler said finally. I know. Doesn't stop me from doing it anyway. Hawk wiped his eyes with his good hand, embarrassed by the display of emotion. But that's my burden to carry. You've got your own now. The men you killed today. That weight is yours. All I can do is teach you how to carry it without letting it crush you. Before Tyler could respond, his phone buzzed. A text from Sheriff Bolton. 3 words that made his blood run cold. We have a problem. Tyler called immediately. Bolton answered on the first ring, his voice tight with an urgency that made Tyler's combat instincts flare to life. Tyler, where are you? Hospital with Hawk. What's wrong? The cartel knows who you are. They got your name from somewhere, probably ran your face through recognition software from security cameras near the compound. They've put a price on your head. $50,000. They're calling you and Hawk cop killers saying you murdered their people in cold blood. That's insane. We rescued hostages. Facts don't matter to them. What matters is you made them look weak. You embarrassed them. And Carlos Mendez had a brother, runs the Agua Prieta cell. He's swearing blood vengeance. Bolton paused. Tyler, these people don't forgive and they don't forget. You need to disappear, witness protection, new identity, the works. Tyler looked at Hawk, at the old warrior lying in a hospital bed because he'd kept a promise to a dead friend. Thought about running, hiding, spending the rest of his life looking over his shoulder. Thought about what his father would do in this situation. No, Tyler said. Tyler, be reasonable. These are professional killers. They have resources, connections, patience. They'll find you eventually, and when they do, you're dead. Then let them come, Tyler replied, his voice harder than he'd ever heard it. I'm done running from things. If they want blood, they can try to take it. They can try to. Bolton sighed, the sound of a man watching someone make a choice he understood but couldn't endorse. All right, your funeral, but do me a favor. Don't make it literal. I've got enough paperwork as it is. Tyler ended the call, found Hawk watching him with an expression that was equal parts pride and concern. Cartel wants you dead, the old man said. It wasn't a question. Us, they want us dead. Hawk nodded slowly. Good, let them want. Wanting and getting are different things. He struggled to sit up, his face going pale with the effort. Help me out of this bed. We've got work to do. You just had surgery, Tyler protested, and I've been shot worse and recovered faster. Time is a luxury we don't have. If the cartel is coming, we need to be ready, and we need to choose the ground we fight on. Hawk's eyes had that 1,000-yard stare now, looking past Tyler to tactical considerations and strategic positions. We go back to the ranch. We fortify. We prepare. And when they come, we give them the fight of their lives. That's suicide, Tyler said, even as part of him thrilled at the prospect of standing and fighting instead of running and hiding. No, Hawk corrected, that's warfare. And son, I've been at war since I was 23 years old. It's the only thing I've ever been good at. They left the hospital against medical advice, Hawk signing forms that said he understood the risks and accepted responsibility for his own stubborn stupidity. Bolton met them in the parking lot with weapons and equipment, his face grim but resigned. I can't officially help you, Bolton said, but unofficially, here's everything you'll need to turn that ranch into a fortress. Motion sensors, cameras, ammunition. I even threw in some claymore mines from a storage locker that officially doesn't exist. Ray, you're a good friend, Hawk said. I'm an idiot is what I am, but you saved those girls. That counts for something. Bolton looked at Tyler. Your father was my friend too. He'd want me to watch your back. So I'm going to position deputies along the perimeter roads. Can't be on your property, but I can make sure anyone approaching gets noticed. That's the best I can do. They drove back to the ranch in darkness, Hawk's truck eating up the miles of desert highway while Tyler rode shotgun and tried to accept that this was his life now. Not college, not normal, just the long wait for violent men to come seeking revenge for violence already done. The cycle turning endlessly, blood for blood, the old pattern that had repeated since the first man picked up a rock and used it to kill his brother. The ranch looked different when they arrived, smaller somehow, more vulnerable. Tyler saw it now through tactical eyes instead of civilian ones. The approaches that provided cover for attackers, the sight lines that would favor one side or the other, the kill zones and the dead zones and the 1,000 variables that would determine who walked away when the shooting stopped. They worked through the night, Hawk directing despite his wound, Tyler executing with the efficiency of someone who'd learned from the best. Motion sensors on the approach roads, cameras covering the perimeter, defensive positions established at the house, the barn, the rifle range. Every weapon cleaned and loaded, every magazine topped off, every piece of equipment checked and double-checked because the Marines who checked their gear lived and the ones who didn't died stupid deaths that accomplished nothing. At 0400 hours, they took a break, sat on the porch with coffee, watching the eastern horizon for the dawn that was still hours away. Tyler's body ached from exertion and his mind ached from everything else. Hawk sat beside him, favoring his wounded shoulder, his face showing the cost of pushing too hard too soon after surgery. Tell me about the best day of your life, Hawk said suddenly. The question caught Tyler off guard. What? Best day, the one you'd live again if you could. Tell me about it. Tyler thought back through 19 years of memories, sorting through birthdays and achievements, and moments that had seemed important at the time. I was 7. My father took me to the beach. It was just us, no one else. We built sandcastles and he taught me to body surf. At the end of the day, we sat and watched the sunset. He told me he loved me, that no matter what happened, he'd always be proud of me. Hawk nodded. That's a good memory. Hold on to it. In this business, the good memories are what keep you human when everything else is trying to make you into something else. What about you? What's your best day? The day I met my wife, Hawk said without hesitation. She was a nurse at the VA hospital in San Diego. I was a mess, fresh back from Fallujah, couldn't sleep, couldn't function. She saw past all of that to whoever I used to be before the war. Gave me a reason to be that person again. His voice went soft. We had 33 years together. Not enough. Never enough, but I'm grateful for every day. Do you miss her? Tyler asked. Every single morning when I wake up and she's not there. Hawk sipped his coffee. But missing someone is just love with nowhere to go. Better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. That's not just a saying, it's the truth. They watched the darkness and silence, 2 men who'd killed and been marked for death, finding comfort in each other's presence because sometimes that's all there was. Tyler thought about Isabella and Sophia and the women they'd saved, wondered if they were sleeping tonight or if they lay awake seeing the same things he saw when he closed his eyes. Do you think we did the right thing? Tyler asked. At the compound? Was it worth it? Hawk turned to look at him, his weathered face serious in the porch light. 8 women are alive who would be dead or worse. That's worth anything. But the real question isn't whether it was worth it. The real question is whether you're willing to pay the price. And son, the price is going to be high. As if to punctuate his words, Tyler's phone buzzed with an incoming message. Unknown number. He opened it to find a photograph of his grandmother's house in Albuquerque, taken from the street, the angle suggesting someone sitting in a car watching her windows. Below the photo, a message in Spanish that Tyler didn't need Maria to translate. We know where everyone you love lives. Surrender or they die. Tyler showed Hawk the message. Watch the old warrior's face harden into something that looked carved from granite. They're threatening Abuela. Of course they are. Can't get to you directly, so they go after your weak points. Standard cartel playbook. Hawk pulled out his phone, made a call. Ray, I need you to put someone on Tyler's grandmother. Protection detail, 24/7. The cartel is threatening her. Bolton's response was immediate. Already done. I had a feeling they'd try this. She's got 2 deputies outside, and she's agreed to stay inside until this is resolved. Your grandmother is a tough lady, Tyler. She told me if any cartel punks show up, she'll shoot them herself. Tyler felt some of the tension ease. Abuela would be safe. Bolton would make sure of it, which left Tyler free to focus on the larger problem. The cartel was coming. The only questions were when and how many. The answer came at sunrise. Tyler was on the rifle range, running drills to keep his skills sharp when the motion sensors triggered. Hawk was on the porch, monitoring the camera feeds on a laptop Bolton had provided. His voice came through Tyler's radio, calm but urgent. Tyler, we have vehicles inbound, 3 trucks, multiple hostiles, ETA 5 minutes. Tyler's heart rate spiked, but his hand stayed steady. This was it, the moment all the training had prepared him for. He ran to the house, grabbed his father's rifle, took position on the 2nd floor where Hawk had established a sniper's nest with sandbags and a clear view of the approach roads. Through his scope, Tyler watched 3 Ford F-150s approaching fast, kicking up dust trails visible for miles. The trucks were full of men, maybe 15 total, armed with automatic weapons in the kind of casual arrogance that came from people who'd never faced real opposition. They expected to roll in, kill 2 Americans, and roll out. Simple, clean. The way these things always went for them. They had no idea what they were walking into. Hawk's voice in Tyler's ear. Years of combat experience compressed into tactical guidance. Let them come to us. Don't fire until I give the word. We want them committed, want them to think they have the advantage. Patience wins this fight. The truck stopped at the property line 100 yards from the house. Men piled out, checking weapons, pointing, organizing themselves with more discipline than Tyler expected. These weren't street thugs. These were cartel soldiers, professionals who knew their business and did it well. One man stood out from the others, taller, older, moving with authority that made the others defer. He raised binoculars, scanned the ranch, his mouth moving as he spoke into a radio. Tyler's scope found his face, in recognition, hit like a fist. The man looked exactly like Carlos Mendez. Same features, same build. The brother Bolton had mentioned, the one swearing blood vengeance. "That's Mendez's brother," Tyler said into the radio. "He's leading them." "Good," Hawk replied. "Cut off the head and the body dies. Wait for my signal." The cartel soldiers began their approach, spreading out in a tactical formation that showed training and experience. They moved in pairs, covering each other, using terrain for concealment, advancing with the confidence of men who'd done this before. Tyler watched them through his scope, tracking targets, calculating ranges, waiting for Hawk's order. Then something changed. The lead pair stopped, frozen in place. One of them pointed at the ground, shouting. They'd found the motion sensors, or maybe the cameras, something that told them this wasn't going to be as easy as they'd thought. Mendez's brother barked orders, and the formation tightened, became more cautious. They knew now, knew they were walking into prepared defenses, knew someone was watching, waiting, ready. Hawk's voice came through the radio, still calm, still professional. "Tyler, I'm going to give you targets. You take them in order I call them. Don't question, don't hesitate, just shoot. Understood?" "Understood," Tyler replied, his breathing steady, his hands rock solid on the rifle. "Target 1, lead man, eastern approach, range 300 yards. Tyler's right scope found him, a young soldier, maybe 25, automatic rifle at the ready, moving cautiously toward the house. Tyler's crosshairs settled on center mass. His finger took up trigger, slack. His breath held. "Fire," Hawk commanded. The weapon spoke. 300 yards away, the soldier fell. The others scattered, diving for cover, their confident advance becoming a panicked scramble. Automatic weapons fire erupted, bullets hitting the house, punching through windows, the sound like the world ending in increments. Tyler worked the bolt, chambered another round. Target 2, northern approach behind the water trough, range 200 yards. Tyler found him, fired, watched through the scope as another cartel soldier learned that distance and cover weren't enough when you were facing a trained sniper. The return fire intensified, desperate and wild. The soldiers firing at a target they couldn't see, wasting ammunition on fear and adrenaline. Target 3, Mendez's brother, range 400 yards, moving target, wait for him to stop. Tyler's watch scope tracked the cartel leader as he ran from cover to cover, directing his men, trying to organize a response. The man was smart, didn't stay still, kept moving. But eventually everyone stops. Eventually everyone makes a mistake. Mendez's brother paused behind a truck to reload his pistol. 3 seconds of vulnerability. 3 seconds that Tyler had been waiting for. The crosshairs settled. The trigger broke. 400 yards of air became a pathway for a bullet that ended the cartel leader's war. The effect was immediate. The remaining soldiers, seeing their leader fall, lost their cohesion. Some kept fighting. Others broke and ran for the trucks. The discipline that had marked their approach vanished, replaced by the survival instinct that said this fight was lost and continuing, it meant dying for no reason. Tyler kept shooting, picking targets methodically, each shot exactly where Hawk directed it. The old warrior was conducting this battle like a symphony, reading the enemy's movements, anticipating their reactions, staying 3 steps ahead despite being outnumbered and wounded. In 10 minutes, it was over. The surviving cartel soldiers retreated, piling into the trucks, leaving their dead behind. The trucks roared away in clouds of dust and defeat, and the desert went quiet except for Tyler's breathing and the ringing in his ears. "Clear," Hawk said over the radio. "Cease fire." Tyler lowered his rifle, his hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fading, his mind trying to process what had just happened. More men dead, more weight to carry, more ghosts to add to the collection that would haunt him for the rest of his days. He found Hawk on the porch, pale and sweating, his wounded shoulder bleeding through the bandages where he'd stressed the injury. The old warrior looked exhausted, every one of his 58 years showing in the lines of his face. "How many?" Tyler asked. 7 confirmed kills. Maybe more wounded, the rest running scared. Hawk sat heavily in his porch chair. "They'll be back, probably with twice as many next time. We won a battle. The war continues." Tyler looked out at the desert, at the bodies lying in the dirt, at the blood soaking into New Mexico soil. This was his life now. This was what he'd chosen when he decided to fight instead of run. The marksman's code wasn't about glory or heroism. It was about standing on the wall and paying the price in pieces of your soul. "I'm not running," Tyler said. "I know," Hawk replied. "Your father wouldn't either. That's what I'm afraid of." The sun climbed over the New Mexico desert the way it had climbed every morning for a million years, indifferent to the blood soaking into the dirt below or the men who'd spilled it. Tyler Rivera sat on the porch of Hawk's ranch, his father's rifle across his lap, watching the light paint the desert in shades of gold while his hands refused to stop shaking. 7 more men dead, 7 more ghosts added to the collection. The math was simple, but the weight was crushing. 10 men total in 2 days. Tyler was 19 years old and he'd killed more people than most soldiers did in entire deployments. Hawk emerged from this house moving like a man made of broken glass, his wounded shoulder wrapped in fresh bandages that were already showing red. The old warrior should have been in a hospital bed, should have been resting and healing. But instead, he was checking perimeters and preparing for the next wave, because that's what Marines did. They kept fighting until there was nothing left to fight or nothing left of them to do the fighting. "You should eat something," Hawk said, lowering himself into the chair beside Tyler, with a grimace that spoke volumes about how much pain he was in and how little he cared about admitting it. "Not hungry," Tyler replied. "Eat anyway. Your body needs fuel whether your mind wants it or not." Hawk set a plate of eggs and toast on the small table between them. Combat rations, not fancy, but it keeps you moving. They ate in silence, 2 warriors fueling up for a war that showed no signs of ending. Sheriff Bolton had called twice already this morning with updates that painted an increasingly grim picture. The cartel wasn't backing down. If anything, they were escalating. Word on the street said they were pulling in resources from across the Southwest, calling in favors, assembling a force large enough to overwhelm any defense 2 men could mount. "Ray says they're bringing 40 men, Tyler said between bites of toast that tasted like cardboard and duty. "Maybe more. Heavy weapons, military-grade equipment. He's evacuating everyone within 5 miles of the ranch. Says when they come it's going to look like a war zone." Hawk nodded, unsurprised. Cartels don't like losing. When they do, they overreact to prove they're still dangerous. Bring overwhelming force to crush anyone who dares resist. It's theater as much as tactics. They're not just trying to kill us. They're trying to send a message to everyone watching. "What message is that?" Tyler asked. "That no one stands against them and lives." Hawk finished his eggs, set the plate aside. "The question is what message we send back." Tyler looked at the old warrior, saw the exhaustion etched into every line of his weathered face, the pain he was carrying from a wound that should have put him in intensive care. 58 years old, shot, outnumbered 20 to 1, and still talking about sending messages instead of running. There was something beautiful and terrible about that kind of stubbornness. "We could leave," Tyler said, testing the idea more than suggesting it. "Just walk away. Let them have the ranch. Start over somewhere else." Hawk's eyes found Tyler's, and in them Tyler saw the answer before the old man spoke. "Your father never walked away from a fight. Neither will I. Neither will you, if I've taught you anything." "You taught me a lot of things," Tyler said. "But you also taught me to know when I'm beaten. 40 men against 2 isn't a fight, it's a massacre." "Depends on the 2 men." Hawk shifted in his chair, favoring his wounded shoulder. "I've been thinking about something your father told me once. We were pinned down in Fallujah, 30 insurgents between us and extraction. No air support, no backup. I said we were finished. You know what Marcus said?" Tyler shook his head. "He said we weren't finished until we decided we were finished. That giving up was a choice, same as fighting. And he chose to fight." Hawk's voice was soft but steady. "We made it out, lost some good men, but we completed the mission. Because Marcus refused to quit." "He's dead now," Tyler said, the words coming out harsher than he intended. "Refusing to quit got him killed." "No," Hawk corrected gently. "Refusing to quit got other people saved. He made a choice about what mattered more, his life or theirs. That's what warriors do. That's the code we live by." Tyler felt something breaking inside him, all the fear and exhaustion and weight of killing finally finding its way to the surface. "I don't want to die. I'm 19 years old. I'm supposed to have a whole life ahead of me. College, career, maybe a family someday. And instead, I'm sitting here waiting for 40 cartel soldiers to come kill me because I did the right thing." Hawk reached over with his good hand, gripped Tyler's shoulder. The touch was firm and real, an anchor in the storm. You're scared. That's smart. Fear keeps you sharp. But son, you've already lived more in the last 2 weeks than most men live in 50 years. You saved 8 lives. You stood against evil. You became the man your father raised you to be. If it ends today, you end having mattered. That's more than most people get. Is it enough? Tyler asked. It has to be, Hawk replied, because it's all we have. They sat on that porch as the morning wore on, making plans that both knew were probably futile but made anyway, because planning was better than waiting, and waiting was just dying slowly. Hawk drew diagrams, calculated fields of fire, identified choke points and kill zones. Tyler cleaned weapons, loaded magazines, tried to prepare for a battle that every tactical bone in his body said was unwinnable. At 1100 hours, Bolton's Crown Victoria appeared on the horizon, driving fast enough to throw up a dust cloud that signaled urgency. The sheriff pulled up to the porch and climbed out, looking like a man who'd been awake for 48 hours and aged 10 years in the process. It's happening, Bolton said without preamble. Cartel convoy left Agua Prieta 2 hours ago. 43 men, automatic weapons, RPGs. One of my Border Patrol contacts says they're coming in heavy. ETA 90 minutes. Hawk absorbed this information with the calm of a man who'd been expecting bad news and got exactly what he anticipated. 90 minutes. Good. Gives us time to get Tyler out. Tyler's head snapped up. What? Ray, I need you to take Tyler across state lines. Get him somewhere safe. Colorado, maybe. Somewhere the cartel can't reach. Hawk's expression was set, the decision already made. I'll hold them here as long as I can. Buy you enough time to disappear. Absolutely not, Tyler said, standing so fast his chair scraped across the porch. I'm not leaving you here to die alone. You're 19 years old. You have a whole life ahead of you. I'm 58 with a bullet wound and nothing left except a promise I've already kept. Hawk's voice was gentle but immovable. Your father asked me to watch over you. This is how I do it, by making sure you survive. Tyler felt rage building in his chest, hot and desperate and utterly impotent against the logic of Hawk's argument. The old man was right. One of them staying was suicide. Both of them staying was stupid suicide. But every fiber of Tyler's being rejected the idea of running while Hawk made a last stand alone. I won't do it, Tyler said. I won't leave you. Bolton looked between them, seeing the clash of wills, recognizing the impossible situation. James, there might be another option. What if we both stay? 3 guns are better than 1. We fortify the house. We call in every favor I have with Border Patrol. We make this expensive enough that the cartel thinks twice. You have a wife, Ray, kids, grandkids on the way. This isn't your fight. The hell it isn't, Bolton replied, his jaw set. Those girls you saved? One of them was my niece's friend. You gave that family closure when they thought their daughter was gone forever. I owe you. More than that, I believe in what you did. Sometimes the law isn't enough. Sometimes good men have to stand up and be counted. Hawk studied the sheriff's face, reading the determination there, the willingness for principle that marks certain men as different from the herd. Finally, he nodded. All right, 3 of us. Better odds than I've had before. Still suicide, Tyler muttered. Probably, Hawk agreed, but we'll make them remember us. The next 90 minutes passed in a blur of preparation that felt simultaneously too fast and too slow. Bolton made calls, pulling in what support he could. Border Patrol agreed to position a helicopter 15 miles north, ready for medical evacuation if anyone survived. The FBI opened a file, documenting everything for prosecution if there was anyone left to prosecute. The State Department sent a tersely worded message that essentially said good luck and don't create an international incident. Tyler and Hawk finished fortifying the house, creating defensive positions that would give them overlapping fields of fire, fallback points if the first line failed, last stands if everything went to hell. The ranch that had been Tyler's refuge for the past 2 weeks was being transformed into a fortress. Every door reinforced, every window covered, every approach mined with improvised obstacles. At 12:15 hours, Hawk called Tyler into the living room. The old warrior stood by the fireplace mantel where a photograph of Marcus Rivera in his marine dress blues had held place of honor for years. Hawk took down the photo, held it gently, his weathered fingers tracing the frame. Your father was the best friend I ever had, Hawk said quietly. Better than I deserved. Better than I could ever be. When he died, I thought the best part of me died with him. He looked at Tyler, his eyes wet. But then you came here, angry and lost and looking for something you couldn't name. And I saw him in you. Not just his face, but his heart, his courage, his refusal to accept that evil gets to win. Hawk held out the photograph. He'd want you to have this, to remember that you come from good men, strong men, men who stood for something when it would have been easier to stand for nothing. Tyler took the photo with trembling hands, looked at his father's young face frozen in time, forever 33, forever a Marine, forever the hero Tyler had tried to live up to and always felt he'd fallen short of. I'm not like him. I'm scared all the time. I want to run. He was scared too, Hawk said, every single day. Fear doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. What makes you like him is that you fight anyway. They stood there in the living room of a ranch house in the New Mexico desert, two men preparing to die, finding comfort in the memory of a third man who'd already made that sacrifice. Tyler wanted to say something profound, something worthy of the moment, but all that came out was, thank you for everything, for keeping your promise. It was my honor, Hawk replied. At 12:45 hours, the motion sensors triggered. Bolton's voice came through the radio, calm despite what was coming. I've got visual, 40-plus hostiles, 8 vehicles. They're staging at the property line. Looks like they're organizing for a coordinated assault. Tyler took his position at the second-floor window, his father's rifle steady in his hands despite the fear coursing through his veins. Through the scope, he could see them, cartel soldiers moving with professional efficiency, weapons at the ready, faces set with the grim determination of men who'd been told to kill and knew they'd succeed through sheer weight of numbers. Hawk was downstairs, positioned to cover the southern approach. Bolton held the eastern side. 3 men against an army. The math was impossible, but the principle was simple. Stand, fight, make them pay for every inch of ground. Die on your feet instead of your knees. The cartel's commander stepped forward, a megaphone in his hand. His voice carried across the desert, amplified and clear. James Hawkins, Tyler Rivera, you have one chance to surrender. Come out with your hands up. You will be arrested, not killed. You will face trial in Mexico for your crimes. This is your only option. Hawk's laugh came through Tyler's wearpiece, dry and utterly without humor. They're lying. The moment we step outside, we're dead. I know, Tyler replied. What do we do? We send our message, Hawk said, then louder, projecting his voice across the property. This is American soil. You want us, you come take us, but you'll pay the butcher's bill in blood. The commander lowered the megaphone, said something to his men that Tyler couldn't hear. The cartel soldiers raised their weapons, 40 barrels pointing at a house that held 3 defenders and the last stand of men who'd chosen honor over survival. The assault began at 1300 hours. They came in 3 waves, the first wave testing defenses, drawing fire, identifying positions. Tyler's rifle spoke methodically, each shot carefully placed, each target chosen for maximum tactical impact. Squad leaders first, the men directing the assault, then the heavy weapons operators, the ones carrying RPGs and machine guns. Disrupt their organization. Make them react instead of act. Hawk's rifle joined the chorus, the old warrior shooting with a precision that defied his age and wounds. Bolton's AR-15 provided suppressing fire, forcing the cartel soldiers to keep their heads down, slowing their advance. For 10 minutes it worked. The first wave faltered, took casualties, pulled back to regroup. The second wave came harder, with more coordination, learning from the first wave's mistakes. They used smoke grenades to obscure sight lines, moved in fire teams that covered each other's advance. Tyler worked his bolt faster, shooting through gaps in the smoke, making shots that were more instinct than aim. Beside him, Hawk's breathing was labored, his wound bleeding again from the stress and exertion. Hawk, you okay? Tyler called between shots. Been better, the old warrior replied, but I'm still in the fight. The second wave reached the house, and close quarters combat erupted. Bolton's position was overrun, the sheriff falling back to the main room, fighting hand-to-hand when the cartel soldiers breached his defensive point. Tyler heard the struggle through the floor, heard Bolton grunting with effort, heard the wet sounds of knives finding flesh. Then silence. Tyler's radio crackled. Bolton's voice weak and pained. I'm hit. Bad. Can't continue. I'm sorry, boys. I'm sorry. Ray, Hawk's voice was urgent. Ray, hold on. We're coming. No, Bolton gasped. You stay in position. Complete the mission. That's an order. Tyler felt his world narrowing to a pinpoint of focus, everything outside his scope becoming irrelevant. Bolton was dying downstairs. Hawk was bleeding out from his shoulder wound. The cartel was pressing their advantage. This was the end, the last stand, the final lesson. The third wave came at 13:30 hours, and Tyler knew immediately they were going to lose. Too many attackers, too few defenders. The math finally catching up to courage and skill. Cartel soldiers poured through breaches in the defensive perimeter, flooding into the house like water through a failing dam. Hawk appeared in the doorway of Tyler's position, his face pale, his shoulders soaked with blood. The old warrior moved with the determination of a man who knew he was dying but refused to die uselessly. Tyler, we're falling back to the barn. It's our last defensible position. Move. Now. They ran through smoke and gunfire, bullets chasing them across the yard. Tyler half carrying Hawk because the old man's legs were failing, the blood loss finally taking its toll. They reached the barn and barricaded the door, both of them breathing hard, both of them knowing this was the end of the line. No more fallback positions, no more tactical retreats. Just this barn and whatever time they could buy before it all fell apart. Hawk slid down the barn wall, leaving a blood trail, his face gray with shock. Tyler knelt beside him, tried to stop the bleeding with hands that were slick with his mentor's blood. Stay with me. Please stay with me. Listen, Hawk said, his voice barely above a whisper. The code. The marksman's code. It's not about shooting, it's about choosing to stand, choosing to protect, choosing what matters more than your own life. I know, Tyler said, tears streaming down his face. You taught me. No, Hawk corrected. Your father taught you, I just reminded you. His hand found Tyler's, gripped it with failing strength. He'd be proud, so proud. Outside, the cartel was organizing for the final assault. Tyler could hear them shouting orders, preparing to breach the barn, to end this once and for all. 40 men to kill 2, overwhelming force applied to a problem that refused to surrender. In 5 minutes, maybe less, they'd come through that door and it would be over. Tyler checked his rifle. 4 rounds left. 4 chances to make them remember this day. 4 opportunities to prove that sometimes the good guys fought to the last breath even when they knew they'd lose, because fighting was the point, not winning. Then he heard the sound that changed everything. Helicopters, multiple helicopters, the deep thrum of military-grade rotors beating the air, getting closer, getting louder. Tyler moved to the barn side door, cracked it enough to see the sky. 3 Blackhawks coming in fast and low, the kind of aircraft the military used for extraction and assault. Behind them, higher up, fighter jets streaking across the blue New Mexico sky. The cartel heard it too. Their assault stopped, confusion replacing organization. Someone shouted orders to fall back, to retreat, to get to the vehicles before the aircraft arrived. Panic spread through their ranks like wildfire. One of the helicopters landed 50 yards from the barn, rotor wash throwing up dirt and debris. Armed soldiers poured out, not Mexican federales, not Border Patrol. United States Marines in full combat gear, weapons ready, moving with the professional efficiency of men who knew their business. A Marine captain approached the barn, his hand raised in a non-threatening gesture. James Hawkins, Tyler Rivera, I'm Captain Morrison, United States Marine Corps. We're here to extract you. Come with me, now. Tyler couldn't process it, couldn't understand how or why the Marines had arrived. He looked at Hawk, saw the old warrior smiling despite the pain, despite being minutes from death. I may have made some calls, Hawk said weakly. Old favors, old friends. Told them there was a Marine trapped behind enemy lines. They don't leave Marines behind. Tyler helped Hawk to his feet, supported the old man's weight, walked them both toward the helicopter, while Marines established a perimeter and the cartel soldiers scattered like roaches when the lights came on. Marine medics met them at the helicopter, immediately going to work on Hawk's wounds, starting IVs, stopping bleeding, doing the 1,000 things trained corpsmen did to keep warriors alive long enough to reach a hospital. Inside the barn, Bolton was still alive, barely, the sheriff being loaded onto a second helicopter by more medics. The man's eyes found Tyler's, managed something that might have been a smile. Told you we'd make them remember us. The helicopters lifted off, leaving the ranch behind, leaving the cartel soldiers to deal with the Mexican military that was inbound to clean up the mess. Tyler watched through the helicopter's open door as the property got smaller. The place where he'd learned to be a man shrinking to a memory. The blood and smoke and sacrifice becoming just another story that would be classified and filed and maybe remembered by the men who'd lived it. At the hospital in El Paso, surgeons worked on Hawk for 6 hours. Tyler sat in the waiting room again, right back where he'd been 2 days ago, except this time he wasn't alone. Marines filled the waiting room, young men and old warriors, everyone who'd served with Hawk or Marcus over the years, coming to pay their respects and show support. They didn't talk much, didn't need to, just sat in solidarity, the brotherhood of people who understood sacrifice. When the surgeon finally emerged, her expression was cautiously optimistic. He's stable, lost a lot of blood, but we stopped the bleeding, repaired the damage. He's strong for his age. I think he'll pull through. Tyler felt something in his chest unclench. A tension he'd been carrying for so long, it had become part of him releasing all at once. Hawk would live. The old warrior would survive to fight another day or more, likely to finally rest and let younger men take up the burden. Bolton survived too. 3 weeks in intensive care, but alive and eventually mobile. The sheriff returned to duty with a limp and a story he couldn't tell about the day he stood with 2 Marines against a cartel army and somehow walked away. The 8 women they'd rescued testified against the cartel, providing evidence that led to indictments across 2 countries. Isabella returned to her family in Mexico. Sophia enrolled in college. The others scattered to new lives, carrying the scars but refusing to let those scars define them. 6 months later, Tyler stood at the gates of Marine Corps Recruit Depot San Diego, a duffel bag over his shoulder, his father's dog tags around his neck. Hawk had tried to talk him out of enlisting, said he'd seen enough combat for one lifetime. But Tyler had explained it differently. He wasn't running toward war. He was running toward purpose, toward brotherhood, toward becoming the kind of man his father had been and Hawk had taught him to be. The old warrior had understood, had driven Tyler to the recruitment office, had shaken his hand and told him one last time that Marcus would be proud. Boot camp was hard, but Tyler had been trained by harder men. The drill instructors yelled and the recruits struggled, but Tyler moved through it all with the calm of someone who'd already faced real combat and found that everything else was just preparation. He qualified expert marksman, top of his class in fieldcraft, recommended for Scout Sniper School before he even finished infantry training. On graduation day, Tyler stood at attention in his dress blues while his grandmother pinned on his Marine Corps emblem, crying with pride and fear and love. Beside her, Hawk watched from a wheelchair, still recovering but alive. The old warrior's weathered face showing satisfaction at seeing another generation take up the burden. After the ceremony, Hawk pulled Tyler aside, away from the crowd, to a quiet spot where they could talk without interruption. "You did good, son. Your father would be proud. Hell, I'm proud." "Thank you," Tyler said, "for everything, for keeping your promise, for teaching me the code." "The code," Hawk repeated, smiling slightly. "You know what the code really is? It's not about marksmanship. It's not about killing. It's about knowing what's worth dying for and having the courage to stand for it." Tyler looked at his mentor, this man who'd taken a broken, angry kid and forged him into something better, and understood that the debt could never be repaid because it wasn't measured in favors but in transformation. "What are you going to do now? You going to retire? Finally rest?" Hawk's expression turned thoughtful. "I've been thinking about that. There's a program teaching at-risk kids, using marksmanship as discipline, giving them purpose like I gave you. Figured I've got a few more years of teaching left in me." "That sounds perfect," Tyler said. "What about you? Where do they have you assigned after sniper school?" "3rd Battalion, 5th Marines. They're deploying to the Pacific in 18 months. Tyler paused. "Hawk, I need to ask you something. When I'm over there, when things get hard, how did you and my father do it? How did you keep going?" Hawk thought about the question, looking for words that would matter, that would help when bullets were flying and friends were dying and everything seemed meaningless. We remembered why we started. We remembered the people depending on us. And we remembered that some things are bigger than one man's life. Your father used to say that warriors don't fight because they hate what's in front of them. They fight because they love what's behind them. Tyler nodded, committing the words to memory, adding them to the collection of lessons that would guide him through whatever came next. I'll remember that. They stood together in the California sunshine, two Marines separated by generations but connected by code and sacrifice, in the memory of a man who died saving one so the other could be born into purpose. Around them, families celebrated and recruits became Marines, and the wheel turned the way it always turned, new warriors replacing old, the burden passing from shoulder to shoulder because someone had to stand on the wall, and the ones who could wouldn't let the ones who couldn't do it alone. Semper Fi, Hawk said, offering his hand. Semper Fi, Tyler replied, taking it, the grip firm and final and full of everything words couldn't express. That night, Tyler called Isabella from his hotel room. They'd kept in touch since the rescue, tentative at first, then more regularly, a connection forged in trauma, but growing into something that might be friendship and might be more. She was back in school, studying nursing, determined to help people the way she'd been helped. I graduated boot camp today, Tyler told her. I heard, Isabella replied, warmth in her voice. My sister told me. She's very proud of you. We all are. I just did what needed doing. No, Isabella corrected gently. You did what most people wouldn't. You stood up. You fought back. You saved us when no one else would. That matters. They talked for an hour about her school, about his training, about the future neither of them could predict, but both were determined to face with courage instead of fear. When they finally said goodbye, Tyler felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not the naive hope of children who think the world is fair. The harder hope of people who've seen the darkness and choose to light candles anyway. He fell asleep thinking about his father, about Hawk, about the 8 women who got to live because 2 men decided their lives mattered more than safety or comfort or the easy path. He dreamed of the desert, of rifle shots echoing across empty spaces, of standing on porches, watching sunrises that promised nothing except another day to fight for something worth fighting for. In New Mexico, Hawk sat on his porch despite the late hour, coffee in hand, watching the stars wheel overhead in their ancient patterns. The ranch was quiet now, peaceful, the violence that had marked it fading into memory. The bodies were gone, the bullet holes repaired, the blood washed away by rain and time. But the memories remain. Marcus, young and vital, learning to be a sniper. Tyler, angry and lost, learning to be a man. The women saved, the cartel defeated, the promise kept. Hawk's shoulder still hurt, would probably always hurt, but pain was just weakness leaving the body, or in his case, weakness staying in the body and demanding acknowledgement. He was 58 years old. He'd been shot 5 times over the course of his life. He'd killed more men than he cared to count. He'd loved a woman who'd made him better than he deserved to be. He'd kept a promise to a dying friend, and in keeping it, had found purpose in the years after purpose should have faded. I kept my word, Marcus, Hawk said to the stars, to the memory, to the ghost that lived in his heart. Your boy is a Marine, a good one, better than we were at his age. You'd be proud. The stars didn't answer, but Hawk didn't need them to. He knew the truth. He'd done what Marcus had asked. He'd watched over Tyler, had taught him, had prepared him for a world that was hard and unfair and full of people who needed protecting from those who do them harm. The marksman's code wasn't written in books or taught in schools. It was passed from warrior to warrior, from generation to generation, measured in sacrifice and proven in blood. It said that some people stood between evil and innocence. That precision mattered. That duty was heavier than mountains and lighter than death. That love expressed through protection was the truest kind. Hawk had lived that code. Marcus had died for it. Tyler was learning it. And somewhere in the vast American night, other young men and women were learning it too, preparing to take their place on the wall, to stand the watch, to be the ones who refused to let darkness win without a fight. The code endured. The marksman's code. Precision protects, honor endures, love transcends. And warriors, true warriors, never really die. They just teach the next generation how to live. 58 years old, 40 enemies, 1 promise. When I heard this story, I thought about my grandfather who spent 30 years keeping a similar promise after Korea. He never talked about it, but I watched him shape lives through the same quiet discipline Hawk showed Tyler. That's what gets me. Honor isn't outdated, it's eternal. Veterans, what promise are you still keeping? Share below. Your brothers are listening and your story matters. If this reminded you why you served, subscribe. More missions coming, all honoring the code. Semper Fi, your storyteller.